and his deputy Rigathi Gachagua not to take him lightly. The rally saw the Azimio leader push for implementation of the conditions he gave the Kenya Kwanza administration during his last week's rally, among which is the demand that President Ruto and all leaders in the government resign. Odinga maintains that the 2022 polls were rigged in favor of Ruto and is now demanding that the entire IEBC infrastructure be subjected to an audit.
Wakenyans mpaka waheshimiwe. Matokeo ya Wakenya mpaka heshimiwe. Ama sivyo? 8,000,000 ni mingi kushinda 5,000,000. Sivyo? Bwana Ruto tumeshinda na kula 2,200,000. Na hata akirudi kwa kiwanja tutashinda yeye tena. Kwa hiyo tumesema Ruto must go. Ruto. Wangapi wanasema Ruto must go? Nione kwa mkono.
And Jubilee Party Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni has dismissed the possibility of a political truce between Azimio la Umoja leader Raila Odinga and President William Ruto, similar to the former ceasefire with retired President Uhuru Kenyatta on March 9, 2018. During a rally at the Jacaranda grounds in Nairobi, where Odinga met his supporters, Kioni said the Azimio leader is in no need of a handshake with the current administration, which he called planless. He said that the coalition party is instead pushing for the implementation of the conditions Odinga gave the Kenya Kwanza administration during the last rally, among which is the demand that President Ruto and all leaders in the government resign. And Ruto's party leader John Jacoya has warned President William Ruto that he is a mastermind in overthrowing many government, although he mentioned that he has no intention in removing any regime from power. He insisted that justice must be served. With no shred of evidence, Jacoya told a rally in Jacaranda that the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission denied him 2.8 million votes during the polls. In the declared results by IEBC Chair Wafula Chebukati, Jacoya was the distant third with 61,969 votes. The Roots Party leader claimed that the Attorney General Justin Muturi wants to fold his party, pleading with Odinga to intervene on the matter. This is even as he castigated leaders within the Azimio coalition who were secretly working with President William Ruto. Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi has urged President William Ruto to stay put, focus and keep his eye on the ball, calling on him not to be distracted or swayed by the happenings being propagated by the Azimio camp led by their leader Raila Odinga. Mudavadi said that the theatrics being orchestrated by the Azimio team are out to circumvent the rule of law, cause unnecessary anxiety and thus signaling a recipe of economic instability that could result into threatening national peace and unity. Speaking in Narok County, Mudavadi quickly pointed an accusing finger to the Azimio leader Raila Odinga and his brigade for staying too long on the queue of uncertainty without accepting that the electioneering period is long gone and Kenyans have moved on. He said it is now evident that many of Azimio supporters have not accepted the reality of things after the August 2022 Kenya Kwanza victory. And President Ruto has emphasized on the need for political and religious leaders to intensify the war against drug abuse and consumption of illicit brew among the youth. Speaking in Narok Town during an interdenominational prayer service, Ruto regretted that alcoholism was taking toll on the lives of many youths across the country. The president said investigations will be launched on the issuance of licenses to bar owners to get rid of unscrupulous businesses in the sector. He asked the provincial administration and police to crack down on those selling illicit brews and drugs in the area under their jurisdiction.
Leseni ya mahali ya kuuza pombe tutaanza kuchunguza vizuri. Haiwezekani ya kwamba tuko na distillers watu wachache wanatengeneza pesa ya kupindukia na huku tumepata hasara ya watoto wetu wengi hawaendi shule, hawafanyi kazi, hawafanyi biashara kwa sababu ya ulevi na madawa ya kulevya. The great people of Kenya, tusikubali nchi yetu iangamie kwa mambo ya pombe. Tuwaokoe watoto wetu ili tuhakikishe kwamba taifa letu liko katika msingi ya sawa sawa.
This is News. I am Dennis Aseto. Good morning.
.102.5 Spice FM, Kisumu. The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
Thank you very much, Eric, and it's good to be at the Situation Room.
Always a pleasure coming here. This is the most challenging interview panel in Kenya. You guys are very well informed, and as you can see, Charles today, very philosophical.
To be poor in this country is the greatest sin you can commit, not just from a legal perspective, but from life generally. Yeah. It is very, very skewed.
We've just heard on the floor of Parliament, just most recently, a leader within the ODM saying that sisi ni ng'ombe za baba.
Yeah.
Which means that you are willing to be milked dry. Hapo.
You cannot force me to believe. I'll give way. If it's land that I'm told to return to you, I will. Okay? Because the court has said so. But I'll continue saying, watu wamenirusha. That's all that I'm doing.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Okay, so what are we looking at this morning? A little bit of traffic that's building up in the normal places that it would on a Monday morning. A little bit here and there on the thicker superhighway. We're also looking at traffic coming off of Mombasa Road heading out towards the city. I'll keep an eye on things this morning. We're looking at a little bit of it. Then just past Imara Daima heading out towards the Nyeri Stadium roundabout, and it's going to go all the way through there. Monday morning seems all right, at least for now. There'll be some traffic in the later part of the morning, that is for sure. Let's see what happens when we get into traffic hour. It looks like we're starting off Monday just right. Let's keep it just so. SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Talk to us there and let's keep things moving this morning.
87.9 Spice FM, Mombasa. This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
30th already. Ooh, just like that. Month has come to an end. 30th day of January 2023. Hello and welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. Happy Monday, Ndu.
Happy Monday, Eric.
How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. How was your weekend?
It's all right.
Good. What did you do?
Gosh, what did I do? On Saturday, I read quite a bit. Yeah. Trying to become more educated, so I was busy doing that. Yeah.
So we can take the view that we're in the presence of an educated person.
A more educated person.
How about we take the focus off of me and look at CT's shirt?
Yes.
It's very nice, isn't it?
Is it?
It is. I think so.
Okay.
If you say so.
If you say so.
I do.
City. Yes, please.
How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yes.
So what's the pattern on the shirt?
Which one?
Is it a tree bark?
This one. What do your eyes tell you?
I don't know.
The eyes have it.
The eyes have it,
Yeah.
Yes.
Nini?
How are you, Eric? And how was your weekend?
Mine was good. I am well. My weekend was good.
I saw you somewhere in a tux.
And I was taxiing.
You were not tax, tux.
Tuxedo.
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 You know about tuxedo, eh?
Ile tuxedo.
Ile tuxedo.
Yeah, I attended some interesting dinner events organized by the Caledonia Society of Kenya.
Caledonia.
Scott.
Great Scott.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Scots people, usually on the 25th of every January, they celebrate one of their greatest poets, a man who was called Robert Burns. Robert Burns was a big poet who died very many years ago, hundreds of years ago, at the age of 37. But he was their greatest export. And so every year they celebrate Robert Burns Day. And there's a Burns Supper.
Oh, nice.
So the Caledonia Society of Kenya organized the Burns Supper on the day, and we had attended it.
Ulivaa kilt.
Walikuwa wamevaa wale.
Ile skirt ambao wanaume wanavaa.
They had worn the kilt.
Ile skirt ile.
Yeah.
So, walivaa.
Walivaa. Yeah, sisi wengine tulikuwa tumevaa tu nini?
Ile suti ya kawaida.
Kitenge.
Sisi wengine.
Tulikuwa na kitenge. It's good enough as a kilt. Welcome to the conversation, everybody. So let me tell you what we'll be discussing today. There's an organization called the International Vaccine Institute, established by the UN, and it deals with, of course, International Vaccine Institute. Looks at vaccine development and vaccine deployment across the globe. Now, the International Vaccine Institute is based in Seoul, South Korea. Remember the president of Kenya went to South Korea recently?
Yeah.
When he went there, he had a conversation with the International Vaccine Institute bosses, where Kenya has formally presented its application to join the IVI as a member state. Now, that's a big conversation. It's a big movement in terms of Kenya being a member state of the International Vaccine Institute. Remember, we're already having some conversations about having our own vaccine production base in this country with a Kenya Biovaccine, agency being set up. Now, the Director General of the International Vaccine Institute is called Dr. Jerome Kim. He is in the country from Seoul, South Korea. He's visited, and he will be joining us at 7 a.m. to talk about increasing access to affordable vaccines for low and middle income countries, such as our own country, Kenya. Keep it here for that conversation. 8 o'clock, we look at what was happening in Jacaranda yesterday and what happened as well in Narok. Kenya Kwanza versus Azimio la Umoja. Who's going to blink first? We'll have two commentators in the studio. One of them is Gerald Bitok and the other one is Peter Mushendu. They will be joining us at 8 a.m. for that discussion. Keep it here as well for that and more. Ndu?
Mm-hmm.
Who's that? Is that the CS for Health?
Yes, it is.
What is she saying?
Nakumicha Wafula, meet your CS. There's going to be that
CS.
thing every fortnight where you have an opportunity
Madam
to meet.
CS, we want to meet you here.
Mm-hmm.
Karibu bwana. Karibu hapa kwenye studio.
Karibu madam. Yes, bwana.
Bwana is Kenyan. When you say bwana, it's not a tibwana male.
Yes, bwana female also.
Yes. Bwana is unisex. Bwana.
Sawa bwana.
Okay, bwana. Sawa.
Okay. So the world is looking currently at 674 million is what it looks like in terms of COVID numbers. Let's take a look at what is happening in Kenya. One new case from a sample size of just over 120. And again, very low in terms of percentages. We're looking at 1%, if not lower than that. If you look at the numbers and how they're being calculated, less than 1% is what Kenya is looking at today. What's happening with COVID around the world is that the vaccination lethargy or apathy that we see in Kenya is not just Kenyan issue. It's not unique to Kenya. The UK is having the same problem. The US also, where people are thinking, okay, so we've had this thing for 2.5 years. See, we're fine. Those who've died have died. Those who have, contracted it have gotten vaccinated, etc., etc. So there seems to be some apathy when it comes to getting these vaccines done. And it seems to be a around the world problem. Are there still issues in China? Yes, there are. But, again, it's hitting a bit of a lull in terms of what people are paying attention to. China still dealing with high numbers of what they're calling respiratory illness. And have they ended in death over the last 2 months? Yes, they have. Pyongyang still continues to have that issue. The last day of lockdown, according to them, should be today. So it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, going into full lockdown, at least in Pyongyang, and then seeing what happens after that in terms of these COVID numbers. But again, we're dealing with an issue that is going to be part of life for the next, however long, we're not sure. But folks are dealing with it as it comes. So nothing is jutting out in terms of COVID, but the numbers are still there. And some countries having to contend with these issues. That's what it looks like for COVID this morning.
16 after 6. Live stream is up on YouTube and Facebook. Are you online? Let us know where you're locked in from, what kind of weekend you had. And we will be doing our usual shout-outs. Is the live stream up?
This thing is doing me some harm, man.
Ednah, it's on. The live stream is up? Yes, the live stream is up. Yep. Tell us where you're tuned in from. We'll do the shout-outs shortly. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Congratulations. You've seen the hand of the Lord. Thank you very much. I've earned another title today, this morning at SpiceFM. Mama Justice, I don't mind it.
Joel in Kericho.
Salama sana Heri, habari ya asubuhi.
Salama bwana, mambo namna gani?
Salama kabisa bro.
Mambo ya Aina Moi kuliendaje?
Mambo ya Aina Moi, vile nilikwambia ndugu yangu, alienda asubuhi na ile gari ya kwanza.
I must have missed it.
So did I.
Even if somebody was to render you irrelevant, there is still work you can do. Okay, sawa.
I deserve to keep you accountable. You deserve to give me a report. You don't work for me. I don't work for you. You work for me.
Do you like that Freudian slip? Lovely, isn't it? Thank you very much.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
15 degrees and mostly clear conditions in Nairobi this morning. We'll see highs of 27 and we'll see highs of 28 in a partly cloudy Nakuru at 13. It's 11 and cloudy in Eldoret, highs of 27, and we'll see highs of 27 as well in a partly cloudy Nyeri at 10. 24 and mostly cloudy in Mombasa, highs of 31 and lows of 24, and we'll see lows of 25 in Malindi where it's cloudy, going to highs of 30. 20 and mostly clear in Kisumu, highs of 29 and lows of 18, and we'll see highs of 30 in Kakamega where it's partly cloudy at 15. 21 and clear in Kampala this morning, highs of 29, and we'll see highs of 32 in a partly cloudy Dar es Salaam at 25. It's 15 and cloudy in Johannesburg, highs of 22, and we'll see highs of 33 in a partly cloudy Lagos at 26. 23 and a rainy morning in Kinshasa, highs of 30 and lows of 23. Out in Beijing, Monday afternoon is 4 degrees and sunny, highs of 8 and lows of -7. And it's cloudy at 5 in Paris, going to highs of 9 and lows of 1. It's cloudy at 8 in London, highs of 10 and lows of 4, and mostly cloudy conditions Sunday night in New York. Coming into Monday, we'll see highs of 10 and lows of 4.
Chilled Spice. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings.
All right. It's 20 minutes after 6. Very good morning to you. So who is online?
Macha is well tuned this morning. Bewa Macha Ashley says good morning to good morning, Ashley. And how are you doing this morning? Willie Bazu is also tuned in. Amimo Vin says good morning, Spice. The 2022 presidential election campaign is now back at her peak. We wish them good luck. Oh, all right. Ngatarangai is where Newton is this morning. And Mukangai Jeff says he's tuned in from Langas in Eldoret. And Langat Kipkirui is also tuned in from Eldoret. Kamtugu is tuned in this morning and says, good morning, everybody. And Kahawa is where Daniel is tuned in from. Trans-Nzoia in Kitale County. Also saying hello to William. MCA James says good morning, tuning from Nyali, Mombasa, and good morning from Kakamega. That's where Zachary is. Alex Mboko is tuning from Nyeri.
Which Zachary is in Kakamega?
Zachary Ondio.
Oh,
The other
okay.
one is still in
Okay.
Gatondo South.
Okay.
Elizabeth Wanyoike Muli is tuning from Orlando, Florida, that is. Monis Janeth is tuning from Singapore. And Kefa Ombachi Onchiri is tuned in as well. Robin Bogo says good morning. He's tuning in from Mombasa. Quite a number of comments. If I can get this computer to just do the thing that it's supposed to be doing. Voila.
Computer do like that.
Please. It has still refused.
It has refused.
It has refused. But quite a lot of us online this morning. We do see you and we thank you for joining us today.
Everybody, welcome. City Muga.
Yes.
Where are the proverbs for this week coming
Namibia.
from? Namibia.
Yes. We are in the country of Namibia, the Republic of Namibia, to be precise. You know, I've never really known how to pronounce the capital of this wonderful country because I am certain that the way it is written is not the way it is pronounced.
Try.
It's written Windhoek, but I am certain it is not pronounced Windhoek.
It's pronounced Windhoek.
Windhoek. So you take a breath, you breathe out. You breathe out when you're when you're pronouncing the hook.
So the OE is pronounced
Oh, it's Windhoek.
Windhoek.
Okay.
And the W is a V.
I haven't ended my trials, and tribulations yet.
Okay.
They have a president whose name I also cannot pronounce. Your Excellency, I do not mean to really desecrate your name. It's written Hage. I don't know whether it's Hage or it's Hage. I'm not sure. Okay? The second one, I think, is slightly easier. It's Geingob. So that one is again Gob. That one I've got right. But I am also certain that this is not the way these names are pronounced. So why don't we leave it there? All right? Okay. Proverb number 1 today.
Proverb.
Yes, I'll be telling you more about this country, which is predominantly desert, by the way. But we will talk about it and their people. Envy and greed grow from the same stalk.
Envy and greed grow from the same stalk. Okay.
One branch is that to be something else, but at least
If you find greed,
you'll find envy.
Envy is not far.
Okay. Is envy a bad thing?
Yes.
Why?
Because it connotes and it denotes dissatisfaction in the worst possible way.
What's the difference between envy and jealousy?
Oh, there's a massive difference. Yes. When you are envious, it means you are desirous of what someone has, and so your emotional reaction to it is called envy. You wish you had it.
Right.
Yes. Jealousy relates specifically to relationships, direct relationships.
Human beings.
Human beings to human beings. Okay? Now, you could say they're synonymous, that I'm jealous this person has this and the other, but the term of reference, the usage, is in relationships.
Okay.
You are interested in another human being.
So
and
one
somebody
is
else
human,
interested.
the other is material.
No, the usage is what is material. Envy can also, well, it's human to human because you look at what someone else has and you wish you had it. It's not that I look at a tree and I wish I had leaves. No. It is, I look at another human being.
And you wish you had that tree.
Yes, that's something like that.
Envy, you wish you had that thing that person has.
And
I think it also would, the danger then is might lead you to behaving in a certain manner. Jealousy is that, you feel bad for somebody, about what somebody else,
Or
is.
someone's affection is directed elsewhere than at yourself.
So you
and
feel
so
jealous.
you're jealous of the other person.
You're jealous of the person that's receiving.
Yes.
What you think you ought to be receiving.
Yes, which you, in most cases, you believe is your birthright. Yes. Like you have to be liked. And you don't consider what it is you need to do in order to be liked.
Oh, right. So I feel jealous because people like Eric and they don't like me.
Yes,
so I'm
exactly.
jealous of Eric.
You're jealous of Eric.
But then, I see your shirt and I'm envious of it.
Yes, you're not jealous of my shirt. You're envious.
You're envious of the shirt. Yeah. Okay. Not necessarily a bad thing. It's a motivator.
No, it.
For you to go out and get said shirt. For
Yeah.
yourself.
Either get that or a similar shirt.
You know, Eric, you do have a point, because where these things become a problem is when that sentiment dominates your being. If it's something that can be summed up as a reaction, then it is not a bad thing. No. But when it is your modus operandi, then it is a problem operandi. Like that.
All right. Let's look at the newspaper headlines then. What's on the front pages?
On the front page of the Standard this morning, no let up as Ruto and Raila trade words. Well, all right, here we go again. Azimio leader Raila Odinga yesterday called on the United Nations and the Commonwealth to probe last year's election in the next 2 weeks, while William Ruto, president, told him to forget any deal making and offered to only discuss development of the nation. So, voila, there it is.
All right.
What else? KQ is warning of what? Another loss this season. And yikes, CBC acid test grade 7 report is coming out today. Anxiety among parents and teachers is high as they take their learners to junior secondary, unsure of what lies ahead. While some schools are ready to receive the pioneer class of the competency-based curriculum, some institutions are yet to give parents clear directions on the requirements. This is the case in requirements in terms of what you're going to need to bring to school. They're supposed to be reporting today. It'll be just interesting to see how that all pans out.
Okay.
So, junior secondary report today, and then we will see that the Form 1s who had finished Class 8 last year also reporting next week, Monday. Kenyans find ways to beat rising costs. That's on the front page of The Nation. And it's interesting, that graphic there. We'll let you into the details later. So rising cost of living, Kenyans are finding creative ways to deal with that. High prices push Form 1 parents up against the wall. The notable spike in prices of school items is 50%, guys. This is not funny at all. That's on the back page of The Nation. And there we see record equaling Novak Djokovic pays emotional tribute to his fans upon winning his 10th Australian Open title in Melbourne. That was fascinating to watch.
All right. The Business Daily, the front page, Equity will get up to 510 million shillings for acquisition of Spire Bank. They are buying a bank and they'll make money. Mwalimu Sacco will pay Equity Group up to 510 million shillings for taking over the troubled Spire Bank in a deal that will see the teachers-backed lender lay off all its workers. The deal, backed by CBK, is modelled as an asset purchase transaction. Equity will take over assets and liabilities of Spire Bank rather than inject money into the acquisition. Equity will be paid for the difference between the assets and the liabilities, meaning that Spire Bank has zero value and teachers have lost billions of shillings after buying a majority stake in the bank from late tycoon Naushad Merali in 2014. In the end, teachers, no money. In fact, give that bank to Equity and give them 500 million shillings for accepting to take it. Okay?
That logic, does that thing make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me at all.
I'll tell you after the break. Wow. The other headline, Forex reserves at 88-month low as debt repayments fall due. Kenya's foreign exchange reserves have dropped to the lowest level in 88 months as we make multi-billion shillings debt repayments, marking the second time in less than 3 months that we are breaching the critical level of 4 months import cover. Yep, it is hot ahead. What's on the Star and the East African?
Thank you very much, sir. In the Star, headline. Exposed 1 billion schools bursary scam.
1 billion school bursary scam.
Auditor General's report shows counties disbursed millions to non-existent students and institutions.
Oh, this is the one for last week for 1.2 billion.
Okay. Then the top right-hand corner in green, it's always in green, privatization spree. This one is going to raise temperatures. KPA, KenGen, Pipeline, among top state firms up for sale. There are 26 of them that are going to be privatized. So I think the writer decided to choose these three because these ones are well known. And this headline doesn't quite tell you the story that's actually behind this particular headline. Not quite. Just gives you a glimpse. Yes. Now, in the East African, peace be with you. That's the headline. Pope Francis, that's the current ongoing Pope, visits the region amidst high tensions between DRC and Rwanda over security breaches, while South Sudan is enveloped in unending ethnic conflict. Will the combatants heed his peace call?
So he's going to DRC, South Sudan, and where else?
Yes. There's a place called, I'm not sure he's going to go to Southern Sudan, but...
I think it was going to Southern Sudan. It was a planned... Was it... Anyway, you'll tell us.
I will give you in greater detail.
29 minutes to 7. Let's take a quick break. We want to see how the roads are looking like, and then we will look at the newspaper headlines in detail.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
I have a brother. He was a pilot. He was laid off. He came to a policeman. He messed up.
He went from a pilot to a policeman.
Exactly.
He stole a jet.
Yeah.
In fact, you should be lucky he was not court-martialed.
The Spice Drive. Big hair and the biggest hits from the best decade.
Indeed, it's all about hashtag Spice Drive, hashtag Quatch, KWACH, 3 to 7 in the PM.
The Spice Drive, only on 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Damn.
All right, looking at traffic building up on Gong Road, interestingly enough, at this hour, getting out towards the City Mortuary roundabout, and you're going to go down towards Community. Out there is quite some traffic. Let's look at Jogo Road as well. That's building up as you get past the Makadara train station out towards the City Stadium roundabout. It's also busy on Landis inbound, and we're looking at that spilling over towards Kamkunji onto Haile Selassie. It's going to touch with what's coming off from Gong Road, so that continues to be really busy right about now. Okay, what else is going on? On the Thika Superhighway, some traffic is getting towards that Pangani underpass, but it's not too crazy. You're going to come past Githurai and then out towards that KCA University area past Safari Park Hotel. There's some traffic there. It's building, but it's all right. You can use the service lanes and you should be okay from all we are told right now. All right, Northern Bypass, not looking too bad. You're looking at a little bit of traffic that's coming in through Kiambu Road, but that's not too crazy, at least not for now. We're getting into traffic hour proper in a short while. Let's know what's going on where you are this morning on Monday. SpiceFM KE on Twitter.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
All right. Junior secondary pupils report today. So this is the first day that this new class comes into existence by actually coming to school. It's finally here. Grade 7 learners who were in grade 6 and took that assessment last year, heralding the implementation of the second phase of the CBC. So the question was, when does this all happen? Now we can see it actually coming to life. The implementation is facing hurdles, though, is what we're being told. Number one, that sticks out like a sore thumb, is the inadequate infrastructure. There are funding gaps. Obviously, government has not been able to do enough when it comes to this infrastructure that is needed. We're talking about labs and things like this, that being the major problem. Classrooms, 10,000 of them supposedly were built around the country last year, but we also saw that...
But they were built in secondary schools.
But then we also we told again that junior secondary will be domiciled where? In primary school. So then you must ask yourself the question, is there enough at the primary schools then to shoulder the burden of the need for junior secondary school? Because we know there's the introduction of those classes where some of these things will be needed. So then they continue to ask, labs, as well as water supply and power to accommodate JSS. Schools will co-share resources with their neighbours in areas where they are disadvantaged. So issuing the guidelines, the Ministry of Education said the collaboration would especially facilitate the teaching of practical subjects such as integrated science, agriculture, computer, home science, and visual and performing arts. But then the question for most schools is, in order to have these things done, which are introduced at this level, we need the infrastructure and we just don't have it. Schools are required to collaborate on matters of counselling, psychosocial support and transport. So speaking at the KICD after flagging off books to schools Friday, Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu said the guidelines will ensure a smooth transition. In word, fantastic. Indeed, different story. Because the question is, these guys are coming today, not next year. They're coming today and we just don't have enough. Learning starts today. It's not you're coming to do orientation. Learning starts today. So how are we going to be able to do that? And
who's going to be teaching the kids today? Who's receiving the children today?
It's a lot. There's a lot. And so parents are delivering their children to school. Buses are picking them up. But the question is, what exactly is going to happen? I know we will get reports through the day in terms of how this is all panning out and probably have a clearer picture of what it looks like by tomorrow. But there's a lot of trepidation that is being met by parents and students and teachers as well, because they're just not sure how they're going to tackle this monster. And that is what we're looking at now. In practicality, it looks like a tough one to crack.
Well, let's see. There are very many unknowns, and probably those unknowns are actually known. Let's see how they handle it. In coming days and see. Okay, this is the plan.
Sure. I mean, you asked the question: who's going to teach these students? We saw there was supposed to be a hire of an additional 35,000 students by the end of January. Unfortunately, that process is yet to kick off. I'm not saying that interviews are ongoing or that appointments are ongoing. It is yet to kick off. And school starts today for JSS. 35,000 teachers around the country should have been hired by now. That has not happened.
They will be hired.
School starts today.
30,000 is many.
It is. But we started having this conversation in October, guys.
So when are they going to be posted? When do they get there? I mean, so these ones have been hired and they haven't been trained on CBC.
Yes.
That's one thing that you have to realize. They have gone to school, yes, but they haven't been trained on how to roll out CBC because they're actually rolling out CBC at the junior secondary school level. So how is that going to be managed? And that's why I kept asking the question to Akelo Misori. This entire generation of about 1 million kids, even the ones that come in next, are we just using them as experiment?
It just really does seem like a guinea pig situation. Like, okay, let's just, put in a tincture and see what happens. I mean,
more or less admitted that's what it was. I mean, have we seen this entire scheme being piloted? The argument would be we're seeing it now.
Hey. Anyway. Anyway.
Allons-y.
Haya, wait, tuambie hiyo story ya the bursaries, now that we're still on the education story.
Right. Page 7 of the Star.
Okay.
This is what they have to say. Right. Gadungu exposes 1.16 billion bursary scandal in counties. Reports expose how devolved units could be disbursing millions to non-existent students. 1.6 billion shilling scandal has hit counties as Auditor General Nancy Gadungu exposes plunder for bursary funds managed by the devolved units to educate poor but bright students. The scrutiny of audits report for only 10 counties has revealed a systematic trend where funds meant to educate the poor are seemingly pocketed by those managing them. The reports expose how the counties could be disbursing millions to non-existent students and institutions. In some cases, there are double disbursements as funds are channeled to beneficiaries that share the same admission number. In addition, ward bursaries committees are not approving the disbursements to ensure only deserved cases get the funds. The 2020-2021 report comes against the backdrop of exposure of massive plunder of Constituency Development Fund bursaries. This isn't a news story. No, it isn't. Because remember there was a story of capitation, and this also came out in the papers, of one, a bumped up number of students in the schools.
Yes.
And then we had cases similar to this one where there were schools that received capitation and yet they didn't exist. For something to actually be pointed out by the Auditor General.
There are questions. There are very many questions. It's the same story that was in the paper. What paper was it in last week? Was it The Nation? It was on the Standard last week. I still don't understand exactly what the report is saying.
Money meant for bursaries is being pocketed, pure and simple, by individuals.
Or money meant for bursaries is not actually going to the students.
Sure, is it going?
This is the thing.
Yeah, it's being pocketed.
Because then the audit would be able to track where the entire audit trail would be able to demonstrate where the money is going.
Yes. This is the query that is being raised.
So it's not necessarily that it's being pocketed. It's just it's not clear where it's going.
Yeah, but one thing that is clear,
there could be misreporting. It could actually be having be going to the right places.
Sure.
But the
However,
reporting could
why
be wrong.
it's a query from the AG, why it's a query is just that it is not clear where it is going, and this is why the query is being raised. That if indeed it has gone to the students who are supposed to be beneficiaries, it would be reported. Now, has it not been reported? That's when the query comes up. That you say you have 77 million in the accounts, you shouldn't. It should have gone out, all right? Then when the account opens in the next FY, you look at it and you say, wait a minute, we only have 2,000
it has
left.
dropped.
Okay, so where did this money go? And you do not have a subsequent report as to it. We sent out.
So there's no
bursaries.
corresponding documentation.
Exactly.
To show where the money went.
And that is why the query has been raised. She's not necessarily saying that
that the money was stolen.
John and George took the money, but this is it. If there's a vacuum that has been left, one can only assume 1, 2, 3 if there's been mismanagement, because there is no corresponding documentation as to where it actually went, and that is when the query is raised.
It says very clearly here, in its financial statements, they talk about the county. The Star sampled several counties, Baringo, Trans Nzoia, Kiambu, Uasin Gishu, West Pokot, Narok, Machakos, Tana River, and Kwale. It said the county disclosed spending 19.4 million, but the supporting schedules, the figure stands at 29.44 million. Out of the total expenditure, the county disbursed 216 million to 29 students whose admission numbers were missing. When you have situations where the expenditure cannot fully be explained and, as Ndu puts it, cannot be supported with documentation, then you query. Yes. But you see, for me it's simpler than that in this sense. A bursary is supposed to be sent to a school for certain students.
Yes.
So if indeed it is sent, you will know it has been sent.
There's a report that comes from the recipients as well.
Yes.
I mean, they're not necessarily writing it down, but there is acknowledgement of this bursary by each recipient. That is the way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Now, what he's also saying in addition to that report is that this acknowledgement of receipt also does not exist in some of the cases, which again is why the query has been raised.
Okay. So what I hear here is that there are systems that are just completely haphazard. And that's why you're not able to tell what has happened. So they report that they spent 19 million shillings. The schools say we received 29 million shillings in some instances. So the school says that we spent 30 million shillings. All right. Same school whereby there were 21 would-be beneficiaries of the bursary. Only 11 of them have acknowledged receipt. Another 10 have not acknowledged. But according to the school, we have spent this money on bursary. But there's some people who are saying, we didn't receive anything. Do you see? Yeah.
So now the question is, where did this 11 million shillings go? You've said you've spent it on bursary. There are those who have said they have not received.
Okay. Those that say they didn't receive, is there anything corresponding to show that they actually paid the same amount of fees from pocket? That's why I'm saying this is a system issue here.
Which is why the query has been raised.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what an audit does. So if the audit is actually exposing theft, that is one thing. If it is exposing weaknesses in systems, that's the other thing. So I'm seeking clarity in what exactly is Gadongo saying. There are weak systems or there's pilferage. Because if there's theft, then her report recommendation should be a further investigation.
It'll be
if it is
interesting to
system,
see.
her recommendation will be tighten the system.
It would be,
or
I
develop
think-
a better system.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, what this doesn't do, and maybe it does, CT, because I believe that those things happen at the end of every report that
Yeah.
she does give. So it would be interesting to see what the recommendations are based on what they've been able to see, because obviously a decision or a recommendation is fed by information and data. So the data that she has gotten, what does it point to? Based on this, should you then... Because there were words that were used that would point in one direction. She talked about misappropriation. She talked about mismanagement. She talked about missing. So those words often point to something having gone amiss, right?
Yep.
Not necessarily be a system issue. So it'd be interesting to see what her recommendation is at the end of the report. But unfortunately, the article that we saw that day
And this one of today,
and this one of today do not
they're
speak
not
of a
looking at the so
recommendation.
what.
If money is disbursed and it's a certain amount,
Yeah.
and some of those monies cannot be accounted for, you can't verify it, whether it's by a counterfoil of a check or whatever it is that you use to count. Yes, indeed, you raise a query. Where the problem arises is the history we have of pilferage or reported pilferage. So every time an article like this appears, let me talk about my mind.
Mine jumps faster than a kangaroo.
I am. I read and I say money was stolen. I don't even.
You don't
go
even
beyond.
think that could be a system issue.
No.
Whereas it could be a system issue.
Whereas it could very well be a system issue.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the thing is now what you need is to have a better working system that tracks and knows this is the kind of applications that the county received for bursary. This is how they processed them. This is the decision-making process. This is how the money was disbursed for the beneficiaries. And this is how the beneficiaries then benefited.
Can I quickly say one thing I'm really curious about? Is that of all the AG reports that have come out, and you know there've been many,
Yeah.
what has been the recourse thereafter? When an audit query has been raised, or are we the ones not looking and finding out what has come out later? To say that if she has given, or he, even when in times of Edward War, if they have given a recommendation, has it actually been followed through? If there was actually money that was pilfered, stolen, mismanaged, whatever, did somebody then face the consequences? If it was a system issue, did she or he come back and say, actually, you know what, we've been able to find that there was improper reporting, but things are actually, and everything is reading 0-0.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see what comes out after.
What they do with after the
Yes,
reports. Remember even Edward told us, one of the things that they also do is they go back to the counties and they work with the officers on the ground and say, so this is where we see issues with your system and you need to tighten them here and there, and they take them through how to improve the systems. Because that's the job of the Auditor General. It's not just sitting and reporting.
Yeah.
Even when you hire an auditor, they highlight the issues that you need to correct, and they are there. So when you're starting the next audit process, they're like, we noticed this issue and it's still there. Hiya. So there's something that's happening somewhere in Kilgoris.
Where's Kilgoris?
Kilgoris is in Narok County.
Okay.
As there's a writer called Nathan Ochunge from the Standard who arrived at Enosoken Shopping Center in Kilgoris, Narok, as the sun sank towards the horizon. The slanting rays of the setting sun gave a warm orange tinge to the sky. By 6:30 a.m. the following day, they were at Enosoken Primary School, a hive of activities at the school with some pupils cleaning the compound, others attending morning preps. Sun above was blazing. They saw something floating in the sky when the rising sun cast a rosy hue. The teacher on duty informed them that the dust particles were sugarcane baggers' ash from Transmara Sugar Company. The school is adjacent to the sugar factory. The strong wind was scary. You can feel your feet move. They stood under a tree next to the dining hall. They were hit by a powerful gust of wind, full of dust particles, unable to see anything. After a while, pupils could be seen carrying basins full of the fine black ash particles, taking them to the compost pit. At the staff room, teachers armed with brooms were cleaning their lockers that were full of dust. See what's happening? Suddenly there's a gust of wind. Wind comes with this ash, and then the ash has to be cleaned. It's coming from bagasse from the neighboring sugar factory. It's pollution from ash. When the dust particles enter your eyes, it becomes itchy and irritating, sometimes to the point of needing medical attention. You cannot put on white clothes. This is according to science and maths teacher Mwangangi Chala. At the ceiling, heaps of black ashes that are clear every day. Even at the teachers' quarters, they clear between 3 and 6 basins of ashes daily from each house. This environment is no longer habitable. Now, this is a very big issue here because it's about a company that is neighboring a school and what is happening to the school as a result of the activities in the sugar factory. Big issue. It also even gets deposited into the rivers.
It does. It's a big issue. And you wonder what it is that NEMA has been doing, because a similar case of a factory that is actually polluting the air, you find in Kilifi County.
Yeah.
There's a huge cement factory there. And you will find that trees are grey in color. Houses are grey in color, meaning
the dust.
Yes. And already there are cases where one reads of respiratory diseases being cited as occurring more often than previously or before that particular factory was set up. So again, NEMA has its work cut out for it. How do they even allow such a thing to happen?
Yep.
How?
Data from the Transmara Sugar shows that they receive cane from over 18,250 outgrowers farmers located within a 30-kilometer radius. The outgrower plant cane is on over 16,000 hectares. Now, the issue here is, according to Dr. Simon Wasichere, the Deputy Secretary General of the Kenya National Federation of Sugarcane Farmers, many sugar companies are unable to put in place bagasse management measures. He said bagasse has high levels of cellulose, which makes it difficult to decompose easily. Every year, sugar companies generate at least 2.5 metric tons of bagasse. When bagasse is released into the river, it lowers the pH level, which in turn affects the conductivity of the water, temperature, biological oxygen demand, and chemical oxygen demand. He warns if one inhales the dust ashes that are laced with harmful chemicals, they risk getting chest and tract infections, since sulfur dioxide causes coughing, mucus secretion, and aggravates conditions such as asthma and chronic bronchitis.
Not good.
Yeah. What does it do?
Yeah, let me just mention before we get to the top of the hour. This year, Japan celebrates its 60 years of Kenya-Japan relations. The Japanese have been assisting and providing what we call economic assistance to this country,
for 60
trade,
years.
etc., for the last 60 years. Yes.
But why are you looking at that relationship as them providing assistance?
The assistance began 60 years ago.
Why not? Why aren't you calling it just bilateral relations?
The assistance, in my mind, is preeminent.
What are we celebrating? Are we celebrating that Japan has been helping Kenya for 60 years?
We are celebrating,
or are we celebrating that Kenya and Japan have had friendship, cordial, bilateral diplomatic relations?
We are celebrating the relationship that Kenya has. It started off with Japan assisting Kenya 60 years ago. Japan had already gone through their boom, 60 to 80, 20 years, or what they call the years of miracles, and they were in a position to actually lend a helping hand because they themselves had just recovered from the devastating effects of the Second World War. Yes, that's the context in which I'm saying this. Yes.
Okay.
So for the last 60 years, they've been helping us.
For the last 60 years, we've had a relationship with them. And part of that relationship has had to do...
helping?
Yes, it is.
Voila.
Yes.
Have we helped them in any way?
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. So it's 60 years of them helping us, and how many years of us helping them?
60.
If it's 60, it's 60 both ways. The friendship is a 60-year-old friendship.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Kenyans are finding ways to beat rising costs. It's a splash on the front page of The Nation. Contrary to President William Ruto's campaign promise to bring down the cost of living, prices of common commodities have soared during Kenya Kwanza's first 140 days in power, forcing citizens devised tricks of surviving the hard times. Let's look at some of these prices. Cooking oil per litre, there's a 4.3 increase between September and January. That's 16.31 shillings, and that's 3 months. 15.4%. There's been an increase in sugar, 21.32 shillings. Electricity's gone up by 20.65%. That's 35 shillings between August and January. And petrol, 11.3%, an increase between August and January of 18 shillings and 11 cents. Nation says here is how to survive hard economic times with the rising of living costs. Experts and customers are offering tips on how to survive the hard times by cutting waste spending and making some savings. Number one, avoid impulse buying by creating a shopping calendar is what they're telling you to do. Prepare a shopping list and stick to it. Only spend on the essentials. Take advantage of bargains, every weekend when they tell you blah, blah. Yeah, do that. And shop in bulk from wholesalers. It's probably better for you over time.
Yep.
Change consumption patterns and lifestyle, like discarding designer labels for mitumba. Sawa. Do some chores yourself, like laundry during off days, and reduce domestic costs. Do not overstock your business. That is avoiding dead stock.
Right.
For students, take up short-term jobs like promotional jobs. Pool resources like hiring a taxi as a group, and compare prices from different outlets before you make a purchase. Take measurements to cut down on power bills, like switching off lights or switching off your
unused sockets.
Thank you. I was going to say for like your chargers or whatnot. And then negotiate harder to get a better deal. It's some of the stuff that they're saying that you should actually think about doing.
So basically, tighten your belt.
Tighten your belt, because look, it doesn't look like it's getting any better.
Right.
I'm going to tell you really quickly, a market spot check talked about the cost of potatoes now selling a kilo at 114, up from an average of 80 in September. Increased by 41%. By 41%. A kilo, for example, of unga, 1 kg, risen by 10%. There's supposed to be some unga for 180 shillings. Has anybody seen it? Continues to be the question. It's been increasing through the months, unga, and a lot of people for whom this is the staple have said this is getting harder and harder to bite. No pun intended. Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Dungu has painted a grim picture for the economy this year and says that things are likely to do what? They're going to get worse.
They will, right?
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. The government is not tightening its belt.
No, but you are being asked to.
The government wants to spend 400 billion shillings more in the next financial year than it has spent in the last financial year. Okay? That is not tightening belts. The government will be coming for more taxes from the same people who've been paying taxes to the same government. It's not tightening its belt. But the advice is you should tighten your belt. Now, if you look at what the government is doing and how the government is going, and the budget policy statement is already before Parliament and all, you would expect that at least those people who are in charge of accountability, and that is Parliament, would be raising those questions. Those who support the Kenya Kwanza side and the others who support the Azimio side. The Kenya Kwanza side are trying to explain away the government. The Azimio side are talking about some unknown figures who appeared, I don't know where, and they're still talking about which election. You ask yourself, are these people really in touch with the reality?
They are in touch with...
Cost of living is rising. Things are getting tougher. The government wants to spend more. And instead of raising those questions, you're talking about who visited you in the middle of the night.
Let me ask you this question. You see, do you think that each party believes that they are speaking to the reality they understand? And that it may differ significantly from the reality that the so-called Mwananchi in this country?
Yes. Each party is far removed from the reality. That is what I'm saying.
I think, you know what? And this is it's slightly worse. I don't think they're far removed. I think they're in the reality, but they just don't care.
No, they are working in concert to divert us from that reality.
Yeah. They know exactly what the reality is.
Anyway, keep it here. We have a guest who's joining us from South Korea next. Good morning, 7 a.m.
spice up your life.
Good morning, this is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto. Azimio la Umoja leader Raila Odinga has warned the head of state against underestimating him, urging him to look at Kenya's historical precedents, especially his role as an opposition leader. Odinga, who gave an address at the Jacaranda grounds, pointed out his influence in Kenya's second president, Daniel Moi's Nyeri regime, and urged Ruto and his deputy Rigathi Gachagua not to take him lightly. The rally saw the Azimio leader push for the implementation of the conditions he gave the Kenya Kwanza administration during his last week's rally, among which is the demand that President Ruto and all leaders in the government resign. Odinga maintains that the 2022 polls were rigged in favor of Ruto and is now demanding that the entire IEBC infrastructure be subjected to an audit.
Wakenyans mpaka waheshimiwe. Matokeo ya Wakenya mpaka heshimiwe. Ama sivyo? 8,000,000 ni mingi kushinda 5,000,000. Sivyo? Bwana Ruto tumeshinda na kula 2,200,000. Na hata kirudi kwa kiwanja tutashinda yeye tena. Kwa tumesema Ruto must go. Ruto. Wangapi wanasema Ruto must go? Nione kwa mkono.
This as Jubilee Party Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni dismissed the possibility of a political truce between Azimio la Umoja leader Raila Odinga and President William Ruto, similar to the former's ceasefire with retired President Uhuru Kenyatta. On March 9th, 2018, Kioni said the Azimio leader is in no need of a handshake with the current administration, which he called planless.
Kama katibu mkuu wa chama cha Jubilee kusema ya kwamba Jubilee haitafanya kazi na Kenya kwisha, na mjue hivi ule wizi ambao ulifanyika mwaka jana ukiongozwa na Chebukati, wale ambao waliibiwa kula zao zaidi ilikuwa watu kutoka Mount Kenya.
Still at Jacaranda, and Roots Party leader George Ojakoya warned President William Ruto that he is a mastermind in overthrowing many governments. Although he mentioned that he has no intention in removing any regime from power, he insisted that justice must be served. With no shred of evidence, Ojakoya told a rally in Jacaranda that IEBC denied him 2.8 million votes during the polls.
Nataka kuwaonya wale makateli ambao wako na baba mchana na usiku wako sugoi. Uchumi wa nchi hii umezorotoka. Baba kama angelikuwa pale, sisi tungelikuwa mahali pengine. Mimi nimeibiwa kura 2.8 million na baba akaibiwa zile ambao amesema. Wakati nimesimama, wengine waliniita kichaa. Mimi nimesaidia kupindua serikali nyingi sana ulimwengu hii, na baba anajua kule nje, na hatutaki kupindua serikali ya mtu. Yale ambayo tunataka ni haki.
Meanwhile, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi has urged President William Ruto to stay put, focus and keep his eye on the ball, calling on him not to be distracted or swayed by the happenings being propagated by the Azimio camp led by their leader Raila Odinga. Mudavadi said the theatrics being orchestrated by the Azimio team are out to circumvent the rule of law, cause unnecessary anxiety and are signaling a recipe of economic instability that could result into threatening national peace and unity.
Let us get out of the election mode. The battle royale was determined by the Kenyans. They processed it and they elected William Samoei Ruto as the president of Kenya. Those who had doubts went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court unanimously confirmed that William Ruto won the election free and square. Do not take us backwards.
And President William Ruto emphasized on the need for political and religious leaders to intensify the war against drug abuse and consumption of illicit brew among the youth. Speaking in Narok Town, Ruto regretted that alcoholism was taking toll on the lives of many youths across the country.
Leseni ya mahali ya kuuza pombe tutaanza kuchunguza vizuri. Haiwezekani ya kwamba tuko na distillers watu wachache wanatengeneza pesa ya kupindukia, na huku tumepata hasara ya watoto wetu wengi hawaendi shule, hawafanyi kazi, hawafanyi biashara kwa sababu ya ulevi na madawa ya kulevya. The great people of Kenya, tusikubali nchi yetu iangamie kwa mambo ya pombe. Tuwaokoe watoto wetu ili tuhakikishe ya kwamba taifa letu liko katika msingi ya sawa sawa.
The head of state asked the provincial administration and police to crack down on those selling illicit brews and drugs in areas under their jurisdiction. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseta. Good morning.
SpiceFM, Nakuru.
All right, building up in different parts of the city this morning, and we're looking at traffic that's coming off of Mombasa Road, heading out towards Cabanas and then through towards North Airport Road. That looks pretty busy, at least for now, and we're likely to see that build and take on towards Outer Ring, which then is going off into that northerly direction. There's traffic coming out of Donholm, Manyanja Road, and then looking at Juja Road, connecting with also Kangundo Road. It's quite busy as you're getting into the city. Makadar Junction, at that junction on Jogo Road, heading out towards the station, and then through towards Landis is also pretty busy at this point. All right, and there it is on the Thika Superhighway. Heavy traffic is coming in all the way from way beyond the Safari Park Hotel, and that's very slow as you get towards the Pangani Underpass. There's traffic on Kiambu Road. It's in and outbound. I don't even know how many lanes we are looking at right now. But then it's also busy on Limuru Road, and all this traffic coming off James Gishuros, crossing over to Wayaki Way and connecting with what's coming out of Lower Kabete. So there it is, very busy this morning. In addition to what we had last week when schools opened, we've got another set opening today. So that is much busier as well. Let's take a look in half an hour and see what it happens. SpiceFM KE on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
7 minutes after 7. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of The Situation Room today. Happy Monday. It's the 30th of January 2023. And just like that, we are moving closer and closer into February. And have you actually even done your own New Year resolutions? There are people who are getting into February without New Year resolutions. Those that started with New Year resolutions are looking back into 4 weeks and wondering, okay, was it still a new year? Oh, it's still a new year. I mean, the resolutions can begin in March. You know what I mean? Why must we begin New Year resolutions at the beginning of the year?
As long as you begin by the 31st of December.
As long as you begin somewhere.
But why must you have New Year resolutions?
You mustn't.
Why don't you just resolve to do whatever you want to do on a daily basis and plan?
So have New Day resolutions?
Well, not really. Just determine and plan your time and day as you like to see it develop, and then make sure you actualize it on a daily basis. This New Year resolution, strong statements, strong thinking, strong desire to make huge changes. Just the very energy that is put into it, in my mind, guarantees it doesn't go far. Yes.
You're against planning.
No.
Medium to long-term planning.
Actually,
you
no.
just want to live day by day.
Not really. What I find, the false note is here. You start on such a high note and with such high energy, and sometimes it's very contrary to the realities of everyday life. So you could argue, but that's the whole point. You plan so that you can fit in everyday life into this. And I'm saying, yes, so since you can do that, why do you need to make a resolution at the beginning of the year? What for?
Allah. Anyway, we have a guest in the studio and a guest visiting us from Seoul, South Korea. He's been in the country for an entire week. Dr. Jerome Kim is the Director General of the International Vaccine Institute. Do you know what that is? He'll tell you more about it. Let's welcome him with the day's proverb. This one is from Namibia.
The country of Namibia, whose capital, as Ndu told me, it is written Windhoek, but it's pronounced Windhoek.
Windhoek.
Yes.
Well done.
That breathing out.
Yeah, Windhoek.
Okay. Envy and greed grow from the same stock.
Envy and greed grow from the same stock. All right. Dr. Jerome Kim, good morning.
Good morning. It's a
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here.
We call that the hot seat of the Situation Room. So make yourself comfortable. It's going to be a smooth ride. We may experience some turbulence at some point, but don't worry. Nothing to worry about.
Thanks. I know I'm in good hands.
Yes, you are. Let's begin with that proverb from Namibia. Do you relate with the proverb?
I think, my and IVI's philosophy, the institute, the International Vaccine Institute, really are trying to work to alleviate the consequences of inequity. And inequity, of course, has its root in envy and greed.
In envy and greed.
And so, and I think as a personal philosophy, to do all the good that you can, whenever you can, with whomever you can, I think is a good approach. You don't need a New Year's resolution for that. You can do it every day of your life.
Sure. It's a daily thing. Tell us about the International Vaccine Institute.
IVI, or the International Vaccine Institute, was founded as an initiative of the United Nations Development Program 26 years ago. Unfortunately, a few weeks after they founded the institute, they withdrew. But
who withdrew? UNDP?
The UNDP. But despite that, the government of Korea, the government of Sweden, and other countries that are member states contributed funding to allow the institute to continue. And then, of course, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation started its very large program of philanthropic efforts to develop new vaccines. And so IVI was well positioned to help in that. We have a mission to discover, develop, and deliver safe, effective, and affordable vaccines for global health. And we've been able to do that. We're one of the few organizations funded by the Gates Foundation to actually get vaccines approved. So a vaccine starts in a laboratory at IVI, is technology transferred to many companies around the world, is then made by those companies, and we work with those companies to get the vaccines approved and then ultimately used globally for diseases like cholera and typhoid. So we now have 2 approved vaccines. A very important part of what IVI considers its key mission. We don't have any patents. And for public health purposes, there are no licensing fees. So these vaccines are really readily available and given because the countries that founded IVI believe that better health through vaccination is a public good.
Sure. So which vaccines are we looking at here? Are we certain cohorts of vaccines or across board?
So IVI works on a lot of vaccines. The vaccines that came out of our laboratory are the cholera vaccine. So when you hear that there's a cholera outbreak in, say, Sudan or in Yemen,
there's one in Kenya.
There's one in Kenya currently.
The vaccine that will be used in outbreaks is actually 90% of the vaccine in the stockpile comes from the original technology transfers from IVI to Shanta, which is an Indian company, and now U Biologics, which was a small Korean company that had never really done vaccines before, and now is the largest supplier of cholera vaccine to the world. And there's a shortage, unfortunately.
Sure. So how do you decide? Because, let's just look at one disease that grabbed the world by storm, COVID. How do you decide, how does IVI decide then which you will go into?
That's a great question. So we every 5 years come up with a new strategy, and the board of trustees, IVI has a board. It's a little unusual as an international organization to actually not have a functioning general assembly, but to have a board of trustees. But the board of trustees approves the strategy and then gives the management a fair amount of leeway to conduct research and development of vaccines that are necessary for global health. And for COVID, we actually sat down in early February of 2020 and thought really carefully about what our role should be. And we decided not to pursue our own vaccine. Not because we couldn't, but because we thought that it was going to be important to help companies, small biotechs, large multinational corporations to get vaccines approved as quickly as possible and to then have them enter the stockpile or something called COVAX eventually, which was formed later in the year, to make it available for countries around the world that would have trouble otherwise to access vaccines. So in the end, we helped 24 companies and philanthropic organizations and countries with the capacity to develop vaccines, COVID vaccines. COVID. And I think that, in the end, the vaccines that IVI worked on in phase 3, the final stage of testing, contributed about 1 billion doses to COVAX. And so as a legacy for our participation in the pandemic, helping different companies get vaccines approved so that they would be made available for global use, I think is important and makes the point that it's not about an IVI vaccine. It's about vaccines and ultimately about vaccination.
Getting people healthy. So IVI was, like you said, initiated by UNDP, and then UNDP pulled out. So now there are member countries, member states into IVI. How many member states do you have, and what's the importance of being a member state?
So there are 39, and the World Health Organization as member states. Not all the member states many of them are still in the process of completing joining IVI, and a few of the member states actually contribute funding. So about 20% of our funding comes from Korea, Sweden, India, Finland, and soon Austria. Countries like Denmark actually donate money but are not yet members. But then the rest of the 80% of our funding comes from grants with the Gates Foundation, with the Wellcome Trust, and with an organization called CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. And our goal sometimes is to identify a vaccine that we can start in the laboratory and move forward, like the cholera vaccine or the typhoid vaccine. The other would be to partner with small companies that would otherwise not be able to finish the process of developing a vaccine, which can be expensive, can be complicated if the small company has never really gone through the process of getting a vaccine approved by the World Health Organization, then we can help with that. If they need help getting the vaccine recommended by World Health Organization bodies or regional regulatory technical advisory groups, then IVI can help with that. I mean, our role is to be a facilitator and to fill gaps. So when we started, there wasn't a readily accessible cholera vaccine or readily accessible typhoid conjugate vaccine. So we filled those gaps.
So what's the expectation of a member state? So there are 36 member states who are, some of them fully admitted, others in the process of admission, but only a handful are contributing the 20%.
Yes. And
so what's the point of being a member state?
That's actually, one of the key points of the new strategy is more significant engagement of member states. And I think it's the easiest way to think about it is this way. The Board of Trustees of IVI is composed of 10 at-large members and then representatives from the member states that are funding IVI.
Okay.
Last year, we recognized that this is not a good way to run an international organization because there's no input from countries where IVI works that aren't necessarily, that are member states but aren't contributors.
So they're beneficiaries but they're not contributing.
Right, and they're not a part of the governance of the Institute. So last year we changed the constitution to allow 2 non-funding countries who are member states to join the board. So Rwanda and Ecuador each now send government representatives to sit on the board. So now we have some input. And then at the same time, we created a new entity called the Global Council, which is supposed to now be our first attempt to create something like a General Assembly that will make recommendations to the board and that will eventually pick the member states that are non-funding that will sit on the board.
Okay.
And the idea would be that between the board and the Global Council, this opportunity to collaborate and to express the will of the group is going to be very important because the difference between an international organization and a non-governmental organization, say in Europe or in Asia, is that we are really participatory. We're supposed to represent the will of the countries that feel similarly about the need for vaccines, vaccination, and public health. And we weren't doing it. And I think we're taking the first steps now to becoming a real international organization with real participation from countries around the world. And that is very important.
Is there going to be a strong voice from the weak countries? I mean, those non-contributing countries, they only get 2 seats on the board.
So the board does things by consensus. So to the extent that Ecuador, which actually sent its Minister of Health to join the board, and Rwanda, which sent a professor from the University of Rwanda to join the board, I think we will. And there is very active participation. And again, when things are brought up, we have to get agreement. And each of the board members has that ability to speak and express his opinion or her opinion on behalf of their country, or in the case of the board members who are not from, who are at large, their own personal opinions. And so, for instance, one of the board members, Jean-Marie Aquabele, is a former WHO leader and is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we hope that the needs and desires of countries that are not funders are going to be expressed. And even before the Global Council, we had an annual state forum where countries were invited and would come to actually voice their most significant concerns. And different regions have different issues.
Sure. One of the things you spoke about in the very beginning was, being an organization then that is hinged on making sure that there is equity when it comes to vaccines around the world. Yes. One of the big conversations, and again, looking at our most, recent example, is COVID. And one of the huge things that happened was when we started using, really gross terms like vaccine apartheid. And we started using, because unfortunately that's what was happening. That even now as you speak about representation of the more silent countries, or those who are not as economically muscled as others, the truth of the matter is that when it then comes to the doling out of the vaccines that could essentially be life-saving, these countries get the short end of the stick. What is the approach to saying that moving forward, or conversations being had to make sure that something that could be possibly life-saving is not then kept away from those who don't have the financial muscle?
That is a great point, and it highlights one of the most important learnings from the pandemic, and one against which we're making slow progress, and we should speed it up. If you think about the 4 gaps, that may be the easiest way, because it's not just a pandemic about the vaccine. It actually is, the response to the pandemic is much broader. So if you think about the four gaps, the first gap was in diagnostics. You're not going to be able to know a pandemic is in Kenya unless you have appropriate diagnostics. And, there was a report, I think it was in May or so of 2020, where a study of blood banks in Kenya revealed a much higher level of positivity than the government knew about. And actually, the government commissioned this study because they were really curious about, what the actual burden of disease was. So diagnostics were a big gap, a $2 billion gap. That was never addressed. The second gap is around vaccine manufacturing and vaccine supply. And I think we all saw that the global north, the vast majority of vaccines are manufactured in North America, Europe, India, and China. And we saw the impact of what we call vaccine nationalism, which is actually not new. The Korean government experienced it for the first time in 2010 when it was told by the U.S. government that vaccine it had purchased for pandemic influenza might not be delivered because the U.S. government had the right to use the vaccine manufactured in the United States for its own purposes. Does that sound familiar? And as a result, Korea started a 15-year program to develop its vaccine industry to become 80% self-sufficient in vaccines and to become the number 5 vaccine producer in the world. Now, at that time, it was number 11. So, but that's the kind of thing that governments will do around manufacturing. And the final issue is, the third gap is a vaccination gap. So what we found out starting around July and August of 2021 was, we were making billions of doses of vaccine. By the end of 2021, they had made 13 billion doses of vaccine, which is an enormous number. Average year, we make 500 million doses of flu vaccine. I mean, we made 13 billion doses of COVID vaccines. And yet, even today, 70% of people in low-income countries have not been vaccinated. So that vaccination gap more than the vaccine gap, is something that is a real issue. And it gets to a really important problem in health infrastructure and funding for ministries of health to deliver necessary health care. And the final gap, and you'll see this one in all of the other gaps, is a leadership gap, a global leadership gap. Who was in charge of the response to the global pandemic? This wasn't like something that's moving very slowly, where you can get countries that agree to sit at a table and very, conveniently discuss and sanely discuss a problem. This was happening quickly. It was like a forest fire.
Yeah.
And who was in charge? I mean, if you have a big fire, you need to have a central coordinating body. But who was that body? And the absence of leadership that was thinking from diagnosis to injection of vaccines is a problem, and it's still a problem. And you see it in the slow progress that we're making towards better response to the next pandemic. You need to have something that is pushing this and thinking really that it starts with knowing what the disease is and where it is, and it ends only when we can deliver vaccine to everybody.
I'm curious. Why would a country determine and decide to be altruistic, and in so doing, focus on vaccines, focus the tax money that their citizens have in helping people who perhaps don't have the same advantages as they do, without demanding something in return?
That's an interesting question. Countries so altruism, some people argue, is never truly altruistic, that there's always some other motivation. So I think putting that aside, because what is really important is not what a country says, but what a country does.
Yes.
So, there were countries in Europe that said, we will share our vaccine. Well, they eventually did. But it wasn't as quick as we had hoped. I mean, countries banded together for COVAX, right? They committed billions of dollars for COVAX, but the funding wasn't given in exactly the right way. So they couldn't make pre-commitment purchases. So when the vaccines were finally approved, COVAX was the last in line, which meant that a lot of vaccine wasn't available to the middle to the later part of the next year. And that was a problem because countries needed a significant amount of vaccine early to vaccinate the populations that were at the greatest risk. And that was the beauty in the WHO's approach. We want to vaccinate the elderly and healthcare workers to protect the people who are taking care of others and to protect the people who are at the greatest risk of dying. I mean, that's the public health approach, but the not getting the formula right was a real issue.
I don't think it's a negative thing to have self-interest, not really. And it isn't a negative thing to want something back in return. That even isn't an issue in my mind. Why I ask the question is because it relates very, very directly to what developing nations and third world countries experience as aid or grants. Now, in cases where you hear of many success stories, it's in partnerships. Because the partnerships then meet the needs that particular country feel they have, as opposed to the top-down approach that we know what's good for you, so we are going to give it to you and make the best use of it. And if you don't abide by certain sets of rules, then, well, we will see when that happens. Now, if vaccines are available to everyone, then that means that the world in its entirety is a safer place.
And that may be the vested interest of high-income countries. Yes. That may be their ultimate interest. Yes. That they understand. COVID has taught them that you can't just assume that something that starts in Asia or starts in Africa will remain in that area.
Yeah.
And that in the end, a stronger global system means that they aren't going to see variants of concern arising from countries in Africa that didn't get vaccination, where there are large ongoing epidemics. It means that hopefully the next time Ebola rises, that we will have vaccines against all the different major strains of Ebola and not just against one. we've learned so many lessons over the past 7 years, 8 years now. And not all of them, and many of them have been painful lessons, lessons that have cost millions of lives. And really, when you really think about the pandemic, it wasn't only, $5 trillion. Because if you look at what happened to the global economy, it was set back, and it won't reach where it should have been for a decade. So it's actually many trillions of dollars. When you think about the amount that governments put into programs to help people who are locked down, or who help revive economic activity or sustain it, another set of trillions of dollars. When you look at the value of lives that were lost during the pandemic, many, many trillions of dollars. And then when you finally look at the kids who were locked out of school, that time will never be made up. And it also has in the economist's mind a value. We've lost nearly a year's worth of global production dollars during the pandemic for a large number of different reasons. And for that reason alone, countries around the world, high income, middle income, and low income, should really be committed to solutions that will prevent something like this from happening again.
Indeed. Let's take a break on that note. It's 29 minutes to 8. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation on SpiceFM, KTN Home and online. Dr. Jerome Kim is the Director General of the International Vaccine Institute. He's here visiting the country from South Korea, where he's based, and he'll be talking about increasing access to affordable vaccines for low and middle-income countries such as ourselves. So we have an ongoing outbreak of cholera in several counties around Nairobi and around the country. And in fact, Cambridge scientists are saying, well, we should increase access to the vaccine for cholera so that we can have better treatment of this now. IVI has developed some cholera vaccines for use around the world. We'll be talking about that. The Republic of Kenya has applied to join the IVI as a member state. He'll also be telling us about that as well, and the progress that we've made so far and what we need to do. We call this break the Minute Maid break. Tell him why, Ndu.
So, Minute Maid says you can take an moment through the day when you have so many things that are clogging up your mental space. Every time you need an opportunity to refresh. So Minute Maid says amongst its list of various flavors, from the nectar mango to the apple to the mixed fruit, you have an opportunity to take a minute and have an moment.
We'll be back shortly. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
You think you can guess the year?
2007. That's when the theme song, that's when it premiered for the James Bond movies.
You're half correct. But in terms of guessing the year?
Okay, if not 2007, then 1963.
Oh, now you're just throwing things, eh? You're throwing the sufria and everything outside.
The Spice Drive. Big hair and the biggest hits from the best decade.
Getting jiggy with it. Tune in to the Spice Drive with me, Edward Quatch, 3 to 7 in the PM.
The Spice Drive, only on 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Damn.
Thank you very much, Eric, and it's good to be at the Situation Room.
Always a pleasure coming here. This is the most challenging interview panel in Kenya. You guys are very well informed. And as you can see, Charles, today, very philosophical.
To be poor in this country is the greatest sin you can commit, not just from a legal perspective, but from life generally. It is very, very skewed.
We've just heard on the floor of Parliament, just most recently, a leader within the ODM saying that sisi ni ng'ombe is a baba.
Yeah.
Which means that you're willing to be milked dry.
You cannot force me to believe. I'll give way. If it's land that I'm told to return to you, I will. Okay? Because the court has said so. But I'll continue saying, watu wamenirusha. That's all that I'm doing.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Clear conditions in Nairobi this morning at 15, highs of 27, and we'll see highs of 28 and a partly cloudy in Nakuru at 13. It's 10 and cloudy in Nyeri, highs of 27, and we'll see highs of 27 as well in Eldoret, where it's cloudy at 11. 24 and mostly cloudy in Mombasa, highs of 31, and we'll see highs of 30 in a cloudy Malindi at 25. Mostly clear at 20 in Kisumu, highs of 29, and it'll go to highs of 30 in a partly cloudy Kakamega at 15. It's clear at 21 in Kampala, highs of 29 and lows of 16, and we'll see highs of 32 in a cloudy Dar es Salaam at 25. 15 and cloudy in Johannesburg, highs of 22, and we'll see highs of 33 in a partly cloudy Lagos at 26. It's 23 and a rainy morning in Kinshasa, highs of 30 and lows of 23.
Spice up your life.
All right, heads up, folks. There's been an accident that's taken place on Gong Road this morning, and this is opposite the racecourse. Exercise caution as you approach. Traffic is definitely building up. It was busy this morning, but we're seeing that with this accident, things have gotten a little bit crazy. Also, the Thika Superhighway is an absolute mess. All the way from beyond the Safari Park Hotel, traffic is inching along trying to get into the city, and it's heavy. As we're seeing it this morning, well into Kiambu County is what we see it looking like today. And we're also looking at it heavy coming in from Kiambu Road towards Muthaiga Square. That's doing the rounds, as well as Limuru Road this morning, coming out of Westlands, that whole area, just past that Parklands Baptist, and then heading out towards Sarit Center. Okay, it's just traffic, right? Waiyaki Way is a mess as well, as James Gishoro is spilling over to Waiyaki Way this morning. So guys, it's a busy Monday morning. What's happening where you are? Try to keep it tight and safe. Let's talk on SpiceFM KE on Twitter and try to keep things moving this morning.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
8, the conversation continues with Jerome Kim from the International Vaccine Institute, live on air with us this morning. So, Jerome, you've told us about the experience that Korea had, with vaccine, and then they decided, okay, we're going to embark on our own long-term program where we will build our own internal capacity. Kenya is on the same path. We are building our own internal capacity, and in fact, we have established the Kenya Biovac Institute, which is the government's commitment to build its own capacity for the production of human vaccines as a long-term measure to ensure Kenya becomes self-sufficient in its vaccine needs and in building security of supply. Now, among the things that we are doing also is applying for membership of IVI. How do those two correlate? Is there any assistance that Kenya is likely to get by being a member state of IVI in its own quest to be self-sufficient in vaccine production?
Yes, so Kenya joining the International Vaccine Institute will allow its voice to be heard by our Board of Trustees, potentially by being elected a member of the board, or by participation in something called the Global Council, which is a new entity actually that starts this year of all the member states of IVI, which will all be invited to come to a general meeting in October of 2023. I think participation is important because we've heard so many times about how we should globalize manufacturing. And what we really need to do is think about manufacturing as not only a factory, because a factory is important, but you need people in that factory who are trained to manufacture vaccines. And vaccines are complex because unlike a chemical, which can be manufactured in a relatively straightforward manner, these are biologicals. So they are grown in living systems and then purified. So the regulations around the quality of vaccines are very important. So you need not only trained people to do the manufacturing, you need to bring the National Regulatory Authority up to a standard where it can really assure the people of the country that the vaccine can be made reliably and at the same potency with every dose. And then you need to make sure that someone buys the vaccine, which means that, a government may have to make a commitment to its own local manufacturer to purchase the vaccine, because if there's a company that makes a vaccine that no one buys, what will happen? And in the end, this is something that could be shared regionally as well. So there need to be a set of agreements for the use of these vaccines in the region. And thinking end to end, there needs to be a way to give the vaccine. We're really good about giving vaccines to kids. 80% of the world's children get all of the basic recommended vaccines.
Yeah.
We're not so good at vaccinating adults. I mean, in the U.S., it's maybe 30 to 50% of adults get influenza vaccine. It's much lower in many other countries. And as we think about health and the benefit of vaccination, we have to think that vaccines aren't only for kids anymore, that there are a large number of vaccines that really benefit the elderly. And as we think about that, then we have to think about the healthcare system that delivers those vaccines. So really, we're talking about what I call a vaccine ecosystem. It starts with a need for a vaccine. It goes into being able to have the capacity within Kenya to do the research and development. Now, you have great organizations already in existence. KEMRI, the University of Nairobi, the Wellcome Trust KEMRI program in Kilifi. I mean, all of these organizations have the capacity to do research and development, but in order to really develop a vaccine, you need money. And I know during the pandemic, people were saying, a big company like Pfizer, it'll cost us $1 billion to make a vaccine. Well, not all vaccines are $1 billion. And it's possible, as long as you have enough funding, to take the vaccine from the laboratory through WHO approval for much less than $1 billion. But that is necessary because as you think about what's needed in Africa, what will a vaccine manufacturer here make? Will they make a vaccine that competes with the Serum Institute of India, which can make a vaccine for well under $1? Or will they want to focus on vaccines for the region that are for diseases that are found in Africa or other low and middle income countries? And will that be a sustainable model for vaccine manufacturing? And again, these are questions that we still don't have definitive answers to, but are really important as the government plots its course. And the government of Korea made a decision in 2010. By 2016, there were 2 large manufacturing plants that were public. We call them pilot plants. And then they also created a vaccine research center. And then the next 2 years later, they developed a fund that would take things out of the laboratories and universities and bring them into testing in humans. And then they paid for another set of research and development hubs around vaccines that were necessary for global health, for childhood health, for emerging infectious diseases, and our mRNA. These research and development hubs were supposed to train PhDs, train technicians, give the country an understanding of the technology that is needed to stay at the cutting edge. And then finally, during the pandemic, they put billions of dollars into efforts to create the industry, to strengthen an industry that they wanted to move forward. So in 2010, they were 20% self-sufficient. By 2022, they were 40 to 50% self-sufficient with a goal to be 80% by 2025. So these are things that are possible, but they do require an attention to the entire ecosystem and figuring out how to make sure that Kenya can participate in all the aspects and ultimately have a sustainable manufacturing at the end. And I think that participating with IVI gives them access, allows them a seat at the table, allows their voice to be heard, and really allows them to benefit from the experience of other countries, and also potentially to meet up with other kinds of funders that have an understanding of what it takes.
What's the process of joining the IVI?
So I'd like to say it's simple, but not having been in this kind of part of government, it's actually much more complicated. So the government makes a formal request to join, and this is usually a letter or now an email to the board of IVI. Within 2 weeks, the board usually accepts new members. And then the government has to, through its own process, approve accessing a treaty-based organization, and then has to send a formal letter notifying the United Nations, the Secretary General's office, that they are joining. And then they're registered, and we receive an email back from the United Nations saying Kenya's joined. Starting next year, the Global Council will pick the non-funding members to sit on the board. Up to this point, because we didn't have a Global Council, the board picked non-funding members. So it's possible actually to have a voice on the Board of Trustees.
And that's something.
Right, as early as next year.
I have to ask two questions. One, what criteria do they use for selecting the non-paying members? And are there cases where an application has been declined?
So no cases where an application has been declined. In the case of so ultimately, when the Global Council picks the members, I think they will pick the members based on location, because again, you want some geographic balance, need, and interest. So some countries are much more interested and actually very rapidly put forward nominees, and other countries took a longer time. And then the qualifications of the country's participation. And, you know, is this a country...
Could you explain that a bit?
Right.
Yes.
Is this a country that has a growing or is planning to develop a vaccine manufacturing industry? Is this a country that has an interest in participating in the clinical trials or some other aspect of vaccine development? Is this a country that has a large vaccine industry, for instance, India, with its very large vaccine industry? So all of these questions are things that the Global Council will consider as it's picking a member. But ultimately, these are recommendations. The Global Council has to decide what participation is best. You know, having Ecuador and Rwanda as members on the board has been really valuable. We've gotten a lot of participation and insights from the members from the representatives that the two countries sent. I think it was the right decision. Should we have even more participation from other member states? I think so. But, you know, again, the board is effective because it's relatively small. And IVI is a little bit different from the United Nations or the World Health Organization, because really it has product development at its core. And in that sense, you know, we're like a little bit like a research institute at a university. Yeah. Because we develop vaccines in a laboratory, we test the vaccines in animals, and then we're a little bit like a biotech company that takes a vaccine and tests it in humans with a goal to have that vaccine approved. And then we're a little bit more like a partner to governments, as that vaccine has now been approved by the World Health Organization, but we don't really have real-world experience with it. And that real-world experience is important because we hope that the vaccine behaves when it's used in big populations the same way it did in a clinical trial with, 10,000 people. But we can't always be sure. And that evidence is really important because when a country commits to vaccinate its population, it's committing millions of dollars of public funding and the time of healthcare workers. So it really, we have to be absolutely certain that these vaccines are effective. Now, we can make all the recommendations we want, but unless we secure cooperation and buy-in from member countries, then we really aren't going to be able to do our job.
But if I may say so, the very process you've just described, let me say this tongue-in-cheek, is like a necessary evil in that you cannot know how a vaccine will be responded to in a large group until and unless it is given to that large group. So perhaps the cautionary processes that ensure that even as it's going on, it's being monitored, it's being studied, so that if there's a need to alter, to change, to do things that would ensure that that safety continues is in place.
That's a brilliant thought because, and it's exactly what we do. For instance, oral cholera vaccine. So it's very important. It's in short supply. There's actually more demand right now than there is supply of vaccine. But it's not perfect. It's not perfect because even though we've made, the companies have made some improvements in the way it's packaged. It used to come in glass vials with a metal cap. And can you imagine taking off 80,000 metal caps? You actually need a hemostat, a little device to ply off the top. If you're doing mass vaccinations, this is not an easy thing to do. It's an oral vaccine, so once you get the cap off, you can, pour it into a child's mouth or an adult's mouth. But just the act of doing that is not efficient. So one of the companies came up with a plastic pack. So they're like the little eye drops that you use. And you snap off the plastic pack, twist off the top and squirt, and that's it. That single innovation allows you to pack more vaccine in a box, which makes it much easier to transport and deliver to the sites where it's needed. But at the same time, we already knew that the vaccine doesn't work particularly well in babies. And it's been a problem for these oral vaccines to work effectively in children under 5. So the next step is to work on a vaccine that we can inject that will work better in those children. And then, of course, we have MSF, Doctors Without Borders, saying, well, we still have to transport these large pallets of vaccine that have to be kept cold, and we really need something that's stable at room temperature, that's in a pill that we can just pop in somebody's mouth. And so we're working on that as well. So this is a process of continuous improvement based on complaints or observations from the
user
field.
feedback.
Exactly, user feedback. And it's really important because we want vaccines to be used and used effectively. We're working on a technology with different companies that would allow us to put vaccines on a patch. And vaccines on a patch are really a great concept. The Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines, has prioritized this new technology. But for instance, you wouldn't need a nurse anymore. The vaccine on a patch can be handed out to somebody in the village, a village leader, and you take the backing off and you put it on. 5 minutes later, you take it off, and it's done.
Sure.
No needle. But those kinds of technologies are improvements on vaccines that, big vaccine companies like Pfizer and Merck already have. They're not really interested in the patch. But smaller companies,
would be
Indian companies, Korean companies, are interested in it because the technology offers a significant advance. And for global health, these advances are critical. So it's exactly your point that we need the information from the field in order to confirm what we found. When we do a phase 3 trial, we really look at protection of an individual because that's what the way the trials are done is to eliminate any form of bias. So we get a scientifically correct answer. It's almost like a lab experiment, right? We are answering a particular question about protection of an individual. But what a country is interested in is protection of individuals, but they want to know, does it protect our population?
Sure.
And that population-based data is something we can only really get when we do these large effectiveness studies, which are still a part of testing of a vaccine. They also give us much more information about safety. Something, a negative side effect that occurs at a frequency of 1 in 50,000 isn't necessarily going to be picked up in a trial of 10,000 people. So we really need to have systems in place to do the evaluation of the vaccines and to follow safety. And this is all a part of, we call it the first 3 phases, the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. You remember these from COVID. Phase 3 is where we test for safety and whether the vaccine is doing what it's supposed to do. The phase 4 is when we test it in human populations, which is actually ultimately what it was for. And if we can't do that, so for instance, the malaria vaccine, WHO would not give a recommendation until it had been tested in a much larger population so that we could actually look at the effect in the real world. And now there's a formal recommendation and maybe an even better vaccine coming up. But you have to do that because countries will invest millions of dollars and the time of very valuable healthcare workers to do vaccination programs. And we really want to make sure that that money is effectively spent.
Sure. As you look at this and talk about, big pharmaceutical companies around the world and the work that they do, would you say IVI is in direct competition to or an alternative for big pharma?
That's a great question. But, and I think the best way to think about it is we're not in competition at all. Why is that? Because the diseases we work on, we consider, we call them unincentivized. Unincentivized meaning you're not going to make $1 billion making oral cholera vaccine. And so a big company like Sanofi may not particularly be interested in a vaccine where, they make 30 million doses at $1.30 a dose. That's not how a company makes profit for its shareholders. And that's not a bad thing because out of these companies is coming enormous innovation, right? I mean, we have vaccines against pneumonia, vaccines against cervical cancer, vaccines against hepatitis, vaccines against malaria. But many of the vaccines will generate a profit for the company. Cholera vaccine, typhoid conjugate vaccine, these are not vaccines that are high profit. So we're working in an area where there's a gap. And we're kind of proud to work in this area because really These are vaccines for diseases that are found primarily in low and middle income countries, and the big pharmaceutical companies have very little interest in developing vaccines for those diseases. I mean, we call them neglected diseases, but in fact, there are even groups of diseases that don't make the World Health Organization's list of neglected diseases that kill even more people. And so we work in that space, and we don't compete. And we don't manufacture. Our Constitution prohibits us from manufacturing a vaccine, so we believe in the process of technology transfer to what we call developing country vaccine manufacturers. And so we've done 9 different technology transfers to companies around the world. And I think that's an important part of what we do.
Looking at the funding model, so 80% of your funds come from grants. Institutes such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trusts. Is this a sustainable model?
It has been. And I think maybe COVID represents a remarkable turn, an opportunity for us, because we recognize, I think globally, there are now countries and development banks and charitable foundations that understand that maybe one of the great failings of our response to the pandemic was that we were too dependent on manufacturing in particular regions of the world. I mean, India was a remarkable producer of COVID vaccines, but some of the vaccine that was destined for COVAX was taken by the Indian government because it needed vaccine at home, right? And so it's not that different from what happened with the United States or what happened to Korea in 2010. So having sustainable regional manufacturing is an important part of what countries around the world need to do in order to be better prepared during a pandemic. And it's again, you have to look at the entire ecosystem, because the last thing we would want would be to put a vaccine manufacturing plant in every country in the world or every country in Africa and have them sit idle. I mean, if the purpose were to make COVID vaccines, how many people are being vaccinated with COVID vaccines in Kenya now? Or in the United States, for that matter. What you need is a vaccine to make in between pandemics. And that's really a critical step, because why train people? Why build a factory? Why put in all the infrastructure necessary? Why strengthen your regulatory authority? All of these things are important for a vaccine ecosystem.
And that's why I'm asking, Jerome. So if you look at, in the absence of a philanthropic billionaire who wants to do good for the world, how else would you fund your operations in a more sustainable manner that you don't actually have to wait for? If Bill and Melinda Gates decided our focus is no longer on vaccines, it's something else, your funding goes.
So you definitely need funding. And so for that reason, IVI is almost always an advocate for global health. I mean, we have to be, because ultimately someone has to talk to those billionaires or to governments or to other organizations that fund research and development. And when you think, the oral collar vaccine cost the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation from start to finish $28 million. The typhoid conjugate vaccine cost them $29 million. We actually returned $4 million to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But it was important to have the funding to go from the laboratory all the way through approval. If we had to, as we do for some vaccines, start in the laboratory, get a grant. When it's done, we wait another year as the next grant is being brought online, and we get funding to move it into the final stages right before being tested in humans. Then we wait another year, 2 years to get funding to take it into human clinical trials. And you can see the delays adding up. Partners change, science changes, and by the time we're ready for phase 3, which will be a lot more money, $10 million, $20 million, we don't have the same. The disease has changed. It may not be in the area that we were looking at before. It may be we have to find new areas, and we may have a better way to make the vaccine. So again, we have to be effective advocates for the need for funding for research and development. And I think COVID again has focused our attention on this.
Shown the way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jerome, for joining us, and thank you for shedding light on the IVI and the work that you've been doing, and also where Kenya fits into that entire matrix of IVI. Jerome Kim is the Director General of the International Vaccine Institute. He's been our guest this morning, talking about increasing access to affordable vaccines for particularly low and middle income countries such as ourselves. Thank you very much for keeping it locked. Keep it here. More conversations coming up in the next hour. It's now 8 a.m.
Spice up your life.
Good morning, this is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto. President William Ruto will today open a 4-day post-election seminar of the National Assembly in conjunction with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. The event, which as per practice with the Commonwealth fraternity, normally takes place at the beginning of the time for newly elected legislators. The forum comes hot on the heels of a week-long House Committee's induction, which was concluded yesterday. The forum will be key in enhancing the capacity of members of the National Assembly to efficiently and effectively perform their constitutional mandate. It will further strengthen members' understanding of parliamentary practices, procedures and processes, while developing a better understanding of the legislative system and democratic processes. Now, the government will intensify its efforts to end decades of crime-related disruptions to schooling in North Rift. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki has declared that security personnel will deploy every possible response to ensure permanent normalcy.
The problem we are facing from bandits poses an existential threat to our country's future. The government will use force to get them out. Kwa lugha ya Kiswahili, serikali itatumia nguvu ya silaha. Hawa wakora wametuzoea. Wanafikiri kazi ya serikali nikikuja, waziri anakuja na magari mingi, anaongea, alafu anarudi Nairobi. Mimi nimesema hii baringo siachani nayo mpaka amani irudi hapa.
The Interior Boss mentioned that these will ensure a safe learning environment across all schools affected by banditry attacks. Now, former Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha will be laid to rest on February 11th. This is according to the family. According to his elder brother John Obari, Professor Magoha, who is credited for stamping out examination irregularities and cheating in the country, will be interred at his Game Yale home in Siaya County. Speaking during the funeral of one of their late brother, Alex Nyabera Magoha, Obari called on Kenyans to pray for their family to overcome the grief of losing two brothers in a span of just a few weeks.
I knew that Richard was not going to be there for long. Biologically, he was going. So, as you saw us there burying Arnold, those of us who knew about Richard's condition, we had a terrific time. But nothing serious, because we are created by God, and the same God who created us takes us away at his own time.
Former Defense Cabinet Secretary Eugene Omala, who addressed the mourners, said the country has lost resourceful sons with the death of the two professors on politics. Omala said nobody could stop the ongoing conversations over the issues affecting Kenyans.
Mkutano wetu is a national dialogue with Kenyans. It will be peaceful. Sio mass action na tunaenda kuleta fujo. Wakenya wako wanalia na wanauliza baba awasikize na awasaidie. We are going to go to all the regions of Kenya to hold this national dialogue with Kenyans. Sababu waliambia uongo mwingi sana. Wakati wakora walisema eti handshake ndiye iliharibu uchumi. Sasa handshake haiko, uchumi wa Kenya umeimarika. Walisema eti watashukisha bei ya chakula. Hapa bei ya chakula imeshuka.
Meanwhile, Kimilili, Member of Parliament Didmas Barasa, has vaunted government's decision to cater for late Professor Magoha's burial. The vocal MP questioned why the government would move in to help Magoha's family, who had set a good foundation for his skin, unlike those of ordinary Kenyans trying to make ends meet. Through his social media pages, the legislator stated that funds set aside to befit the former Education Cabinet Secretary be channeled to needy families to pay fees for needy children from Siaya County or clear medical bills for Kenyans who are enslaved in hospitals for failure to pay medical bills. He said that will be the best way to honor the former education CS who passed on Tuesday last week. Now, the Ministry of Education has launched a guidance and counseling policy for schools. This move is aimed at facilitating students to focus on learning and help them to protect themselves from distractions that affect their behavior and school attendance and their social development. The Director General, State Department of Early Learning and Basic Education, Elias Abdi, said the policy will help teachers and other stakeholders to guide learners on risky behavior that may hurt their studies and growth and development. Abdi cited drugs and substance abuse and radicalization as some of the factors affecting students' focus. He said the students need protection against the negative influence through a robust guidance and counseling framework at the school level. And President Salva Kiir has appealed to all South Sudanese people to maintain peace and order during the ecumenical visit. Speaking in Qatar, President Kiir urged all faithfuls to turn out in large numbers to receive Pope Francis. This is Newswire. Dennis Aseto. Good morning.
.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
Okay, there's traffic in most parts of the city this morning. We're looking at it heavy coming off Langata Road and it's spilling over towards Raila Odinga Way. Lusaka Road. Look at what's going on there as it's connecting, then coming off Jogo Road onto Huru Highway, that's going out towards Nyeri Stadium roundabout and then through into the city. That's crazy. We're also looking at Gong Road, which was crazy from 6 in the morning, and it looks like it's not letting up, at least not for now. There's traffic on Outer Ring. There's major traffic coming off the Thika Superhighway, and that is madness. Wow. I don't even know. We're in Kiambu County with that traffic coming in through into Nairobi. Kiambu Road. Hi. Traffic is heavy in and outbound, and it's coming in through Muthaiga Square. Limuru Road, madness. Westlands coming off Wayaki Way out towards Kabete. Even where you're going to use as an escape route on the Red Hill Link Road, sorry, not today. The Northern Bypass also moving very, very slowly today. And well into the belly of Kiambu Road, traffic is big time crazy. It is, many describing it as the mother of all traffic jams this morning, and it's not moving. SpiceFM KE on Twitter, tell us, where are you stuck? Maybe we can offer an alternative. Or if you find that alternative, let us know that as well. We want to keep things moving this morning. SpiceFM KE on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room.
Good morning, 8 minutes after 8. Welcome to the third hour of The Situation Room. Happy Monday. It's the 30th day of January 2023. Tomorrow, 31st. And then we'll move on into February. And 2023 will soon be over. That'll be it. We want to have a conversation about the weekend and politics now, into what's happening around the country. Yes, there was a big rally at Jacaranda yesterday. That's what was said. There was a prayer, interdenominational prayer meeting in Narok yesterday. That's what was said, and this and that. And we are joined by Peter Mushendu, who is a governance expert. We are also expecting Gerald Bitok, who is also a political analyst, to join us for this conversation. Peter is here, Gerald not yet. CT.
Yes, please.
Welcome, Peter, with the day's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week are from the country of Namibia.
Uh-huh.
Envy and greed grow from the same stock.
Envy and greed grow from the same stock. Okay. Peter, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation, to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
It's an honor to be here.
Karibu sana.
I must say that you strike up to the top as one of the most candid shows that I really watch. I've been a very big fan of you for so many years, so I will count it as a big honor to be seated on this panel together with your panelists here.
We're honored to have you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
This proverb,
yes,
is from Namibia.
Yes,
and city again. What's the proverb? Honor and pride.
Let me just start again. There is a proverb with the very word division, but it's not this. That one in the future. But for today, okay, when you're on the right track, but for today, envy and greed grow from the same stock.
Envy and greed
Yes.
grow from the same stock.
That's for today.
And you know, when you become envious and greed at the same time, you form something called, you become gluttonous. That is, gluttonous is something more than just greed. It is just like you can't get enough. Regardless of what we do, you become gluttonous, you eat and eat. There is, I can't remember the name of that bird. So one of the unique bird that it is relieving its waste and eating at the same time, and that is the nature of that bird. When it is
doesn't stop eating.
it is still relieving what has been processed, and I think that's what you define as being gluttonous. And unfortunately, that is one of the sicknesses we have in this country. We have individuals who cannot get enough.
Really?
Yeah. And if you're talking to a theologian, those especially those who are Pentecostals, they will talk about that. There's a saying that they say that everybody is bothered by demons that of his age. That if you earn $1 million, you start getting bothered by demons of tripling that $1 million shillings. If you get 10 million, a new demon will come and tell you make it 100. And if you cannot tame those demons, they will make you greedy, and automatically you become gluttonous. You cannot get enough. Yes.
A lot has happened over the weekend in politics in the country. Now, if you look at the headlines, the papers today, no let up as Ruto Raila trade words. As that is happening, we are looking at KQ making some more losses this year. We're looking at ongoing drought situation in the country. We are looking at grade 7s reporting to school today. Not much clarity in terms of how they're going to be received, how they'll start learning, whether the labs will be ready, whether the teachers will be ready in time. We are looking at the high cost of living. Kenyans find ways to beat rising costs. That's the headline in the Daily Nation today. Contrary to President Ruto's campaign promise to bring down the cost of living, the price of common commodities has soared during the Kenya Kwanza's first 140 days in power, and we're looking at a huge rise in this. The budget policy statement has been taken to Parliament. It is indicating that the government wants to spend 3.6 trillion shillings in the next financial year. But what was also happening is that they're on a warpath. Raila is alleging that he was visited by Chebukati in the middle of the night before the election.
Well, I don't think that what was said in Jakarta is anything new to this country. It's the same rhetoric that has been peddled for so many years. Well, if indeed Chebukati visited Raila together with the 3 commissioners they are talking about, they must have visited Raila before the announcement of the results to be able to solicit bride, as the Prime Minister alluded to yesterday. Then it begs the question, the Prime Minister having been the complainant at the Supreme Court during the contest of the presidential election, why didn't he swear an affidavit to this information? In any case, they took the IEBC to court claiming that the process was not okay. The process was had a lot of issues in it. And Chebukati being to Prime Minister's house, and I heard him clearly, I did not hear long, him alluding to the fact that he has a video to that effect. Why wouldn't he table that particular evidence during the hearing of the Supreme Court, which was the right place to table that evidence? I mean, I would say that is hearsay. It is unfounded. It's uncalled for, because the Prime Minister and his running mate, Mother Karua, one of the things that they actually pride themselves in terms of the history of this country, it is the constitutionalism that they have brought to this country. And it is actually looking bad on them that they are now advocating for people to abscond from the very constitution we have given to ourselves. Kenya is not a banana republic, and we definitely don't want it to turn into some of the African countries we have seen. Now, whether the current president or the current government is there right free or not, it is based on the very constitution that we have given ourselves, the very constitution that has prescribed the threshold that one must meet to become the president. It is the same constitution that has prescribed the process under which Eric Clat, if he is not satisfied, should follow so that he can get the results and he can get the issues he has adjudicated on. And the constitution is very profound in articulating the process. And now, if you cannot follow that process, that is one. Number two, if you feel that process is not okay, there is a provision to amend the process so that you can provide a process that you feel it is okay. And neither of those things were being advocated for in Jacaranda. So,
what was the message in Jacaranda? According to what you understood.
I think the message in Jacaranda is Raila Odinga trying to twist government and become part of it, because shouting Ruto must go in what capacity? That is one. They are shouting he must go in what capacity? Number two, they are shouting he must go based on which law? So I think for me, it is the problem in this country, from both the sides of the political divide, that we have held our people captive and promising them heaven, so much so that they forget they are still living in this country. Because when you move hundreds of thousands of people into Jacaranda ground and tell them Ruto must go, and we are only 5 months, we have about, I think we have about 52 or 53 months remaining until the next election. You want to plunge this country into anarchy. You want to make sure this country is not governable. What do you expect to do if tomorrow the people of Kenya give you the mandate to govern, if you cannot promote economics? I mean, look at, I would prefer how the UK Parliament does its business. If the opposition MP feel aggrieved, they will hit the Prime Ministers during the Prime Minister's question, and they will use the constitutional means to force government out or force government to do its things. Unfortunately for this country, we believe that if we learn away from the constitutionalism and the statutes of law, it is the time we are able to get solutions for our country. And I don't think that is the right way. For a prime minister who prides himself in bringing revolution into this country, the revolution of constitutionalism, I would expect him to follow the constitution. Some of the things he has alluded to, he is actually attacking parliament. And parliament is actually operating on delegated authority from Article 1 of the Constitution, which has conferred that authority to the people. And the people can exercise it directly or indirectly through the elected leaders. Now, if parliament passes something, whether it is healthy or not, the people we should be blaming is ourselves, because those are the leaders we have given to ourselves. Whether they have passed anything in parliament through coercion, or through incentives, or through goodwill, the point is, everybody in that August House is operating on a delegated authority from the Kenyan people.
Okay. So now, taking all these things into consideration here, would you say that there's a negotiation that is happening by the time that we see folks speaking in the manner in which we see yesterday, the answers that were given by the president? Is there a negotiation taking place?
I don't think there is a negotiation. In fact, if you ask me, looking at who attended the meeting yesterday at Jacaranda, it is speaking volumes. One, you did not see a single governor from Azimio la Umoja going there. Why? If the governors are to deliver to their constituents in their respective counties, they will need to work with the national government. And no governor was willing to actually jeopardize that relationship between them and government. And we must, and I will say, and I will repeat this as the Honorable William Ruto said in Narok yesterday, we do not have citizens who are from the opposition. We do not have citizens who are from government. We are all members of this Republic of Kenya. And any government that is put there, one of the first role of the president is to become the symbol of national unity. And you can only become a symbol of national unity if the government you read is actually working for the entire nation, not for partially those who voted for you or otherwise. And I think that is the myth that we must demystify, that the opposition wants to galvanize this country. They want to balkanize this country so that it is not governable. Now, who is going to rule if this government fails to govern? It is not just Raila Odinga and his cahoot. It is the entire republic that will lose. I, Mushendo, whether I voted for Raila Odinga or William Ruto, if government is not able to govern, I am the one who is going to lose. So I think for me, I do not see any negotiation going on behind the closed door. And if indeed there was negotiation, then they would have a very funny way of showing it. Because if the rhetorics we are hearing is anything to go by, it will tell you that everybody is going haywire. Nobody is coming to the center. If one is in the right, is going to the far right, and the other one is going to the far left. So I do not believe there is a negotiation going on.
City, do you believe there's a negotiation going on?
In the politics of this country, there's always a negotiation going on. Because what we hear, what we see, or what we are privy to is a very small piece of the entire puzzle. Most of what we hear even being said is a minuscule amount of what is actually known by the people who are, as the papers tell us, trading words, exchanging words, and what have you. Half the time, we are making decisions and conclusions half-cocked. We actually don't have all the information. And then also, there is what is happening and how we interpret it. See, I'd like to ask our guest, everything that's happening, if you give a little background and take it even to 2 weeks back, how do you galvanize all this information? And your interpretation is that Azimio is fermenting revolt. How do you arrive at that conclusion?
Well, I'll tell you something that is funny about this country. One, political parties in this country do not have ideologies, whether luring or otherwise. Politics in this country don't have ideologies. I mean, if you go to a place like the US or the UK, you will find it very hard for either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party forming a government of national unity or whatever you call it. Because when you look at this party in terms of finance, they believe in a certain set of beliefs that this is how you should adjudicate the economic matters. If it is politics, they believe this is how we should do politics. If you go to the US, you will find the red states are very passionate about their right to own guns. If you go to the blue states, that is led by the Democrats, they are very serious about providing health care for everybody in the US. When you come to Kenya and you are asked, what is it that ODM stands for? What is it that Jubilee stands for? What is it that UDA stands for? There is no specific set of belief that drives any political party in this country. And that is why it is always very hard to actually articulate or actually say what is going to happen next politically. Because, can you imagine the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga working together, bearing in mind the kind of polarized politics that we had in 2017? And therefore, this is my submission in terms of why I think that the Honorable Raila Odinga wants to make this country ungovernable. Already, this country has set its structure governance. We have the president, the deputy president, and he has his cabinet put in place. Everybody now, he's probably right now organizing the state corporations and what have you. What is this that Raila Odinga is looking for? That is not provided for in the constitution. Because I thought that now that they did not get what they wanted at the Supreme Court, they would have gone for a constitutional interpretation from the East Africa Court of Justice or whatever that would give them the legitimacy of arguing what they are arguing. Today, they tell you that they won by 2 million. Figures you cannot actually identify where, I mean, even if you were to entertain that kind of thoughts in your mind, how would you actually identify such figures that are crazy? They have moved so far left with their arguments that you cannot believe. So this is what I believe, as you have said. The Honorable Raila Odinga is used to cause havoc in government and have his way in terms of his personal development, not the country development. Go back to 1997. After the election of 1997, the Honorable Raila Odinga decided to balkanize KANU, dissolved his NDP party, became the Secretary General, and forced people you could not otherwise believe would actually dare President Moi and leave the party, the likes of Judge Saitoti and company and Joseph Kamotho. People don't remember this. These are people who, you remember, Moi actually crafted Madhiwa constituency because of Joseph Kamotho.
Why are you giving Raila so much credit for that issue that happened in KANU? Are you saying that all these leaders were not capable of making decisions on their own to leave KANU?
But they were not. They were not. They were not. Trust you me, they were not. They would not have made it. Because I will tell you, and I keep saying and I say, anybody who approaches Raila Odinga in terms of thinking he's stupid is very mistaken. Raila is a very calculating politician. He is politician par excellence if you are to measure his quality with the politics of this nation. And therefore, the Honorable Raila Odinga knew what he was doing. He was the only person between the time we brought the multi-party back into our politics. Between then and 1997, it is only Raila Odinga who was able to break that constituency of President Moi for those 10 years that he was elected as the president after the multi-party came. This is Raila who was able to infiltrate KANU, force the KANU diehard, those people who claimed that they cannot move out of KANU, na KANU ni baba na mama. He's the guy who forced them out. This is the Raila who sees an opportunity of becoming a very serious player in politics in 2002. He knew if he did not join opposition and topple Moi, that would become probably the end of his politics. So it is Raila who is able to calculate and eat the herbal pie and say Kibaki tosha, knowing very well that if I bring this old man, I am going to sit on his head and he will not rule in peace. So Raila gets Kibaki. He first of all defies Kibaki in 2005 and forces a referendum that defeated government, something that was never heard of in this
just
country.
Pause for a second. Remember,
yes,
there was a small promise of him being made prime minister, and as soon as that Kibaki government came into power, they reneged on that particular promise. I mean, it wasn't as though the issue of the referendum came out of thin air.
And you think Raila did not know that the promise was not contained in law? Because when he was being promised the prime minister by the Honorable Mwai Kibaki and it's called the Pentagon. That is when he formed the Pentagon. You think Raila did not know that that promise was not contained in any set of law in this republic? He knew. But this is the guy who calculates politics, and he says, let's first of all jump this corner. When we get there, we will deal with it. And I will tell you, this guy, he's like, Raila, I would say in politics, is like that ego, that when the feathers are worn out, an eagle will go to the top of the mountain and stay there for so many days, pluck off the old feathers, and then grow some new and come back. That is, every time Raila wants to make a statement in this country, he will take a flight out and then somehow he will force his followers to come and receive him in the airport as if he went to another planet.
You
he was
believe,
just in South
you
Africa.
believe all the people you see, like the ones you saw yesterday at the rally, you think those people are forced to go for those rallies?
Those people, they cannot. Most of the politicians that were there, they cannot exist in the vacuum.
No.
The people, not the
politicians.
Yes,
the crowd. You feel those people were actually forced to go for that rally.
Let me tell you, there was a joke I saw on Twitter the other day about Kenya. There is no work, there is nothing, but one of the things you cannot take away out of Kenyan people is hope. They just need someone to shout hope and they will run. That is why you will see somebody going to a muganga who does not even 2 pair of shoes to go and be given how to become rich. And you ask yourself, how does a Kenyan go to a muganga to become rich, a muganga who cannot even own his own house? So, that is a kind of... So what I am saying is, the people you saw there, the thousands and thousands
who
of the
have
people...
some kind of hope for some kind of
the
change.
Thousands, those people you saw there. It is true. The tough economic time has pushed this nation to almost an edge. And therefore, people just want to hear somebody who is bringing hope. People just want to hear somebody who is telling them about something new that is going to happen. And unfortunately, that is a curse in our country. The curse of being promised hope, because hope is what drives Kenyans from their home to Jacaranda, knowing very well after that particular day, they will not find Ugari in their houses. They still have to go back and work for
and
it.
look for it.
So I do not believe that the people that were Jacaranda were moved there because they want the best of this country. They are moved there because they have so much faith in our politicians who have taken advantage of them. Because I will tell you, that meeting was financed from somewhere. There were people who are financed to come and talk there. They will probably get fuel when they are coming out of the meeting. But what about all the minions of people that were in that rally? What will they eat in the evening? They will still go back and fight. If they found...
There's no allowance.
There is no allowance. If they left their kids without uniform, they will still fight their kids without uniform at home. And I think for me that is something that we must call out in Kenya. That the political conmanship in this country has taken another level, and it is going to destroy our people by giving them false hope.
Let's take a break. It's 8:30. This is the Situation Room. Peter Mushando is a governance expert. He is a political analyst. He's here talking about the politics of the day. Gerald Bitok, who was kind of late, is now here in the studio. Gerald, good morning. What did you
really
miss?
Apologies. I was out of town, so I was really rushing to ensure that I can be time. There's a bit of traffic.
You know, we have a helipad here. You could have landed here. You didn't have to go.
Why did you land in Nyeri Stadium? Nyeri Stadium then drives here.
Unless you have on duty pack.
Next time, just tell your pilot, or you're the pilot. Just come and land here. So,
next time I'll do the justice, but I really apologize.
So time for us to take a break. We'll continue the conversation after this break. Tell them about Minute Maid Ndu. This is a Minute Maid break.
It's a Minute Maid break, an opportunity for you to take a minute and breathe, Peter. Looking at the different flavors that Minute Maid offers you. So take a Minute Maid break. Take a break from all the things that you think about that cloud your mind. Take an aha moment with all the fantastic flavors that Minute Maid has on offer.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
You tune into Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Ramanya.
Amen.
So 1 hour is over?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It gets over
Can you imagine
in 20 minutes.
What the big boys have also done?
I'm very proud of myself.
When you understand about partnership in politics, it's like the way marriage is these days. When you're looking for a wife, you're like, maybe you can help me pay for fees as I pay for the rent.
Why should you have a lioness living in your bedroom?
I have to tell you a story. I went for a prayer meeting, which was called for the spouses of candidates for senators and governors. And when I got to the gate, the lady who was the secretary, she refused to. She's telling me, no. Leo tunataka wa mama. Leo ni wa mama. I'm telling her, no. She said, no, sio siku yenu. And I thought, there's a problem here, because if it was a man, but this was a lady.
It will be called First Ladies until you change the name.
Sunny conditions in Nairobi this morning at 16, highs of 28 and lows of 15. We'll see lows of 12 in Nakuru, where it's sunny going to highs of 29. 27 will be the high in a sunny Nyeri at 15. And it's 14 and sunny in Eldoret, highs of 27 and lows of 11. We're looking at seeing highs of 31 in Mombasa and highs of 30 in Malindi. 22 and sunny in Kisumu, highs of 29, and we'll see highs of 30 in a sunny Kakamega. It's sunny at 22 out in Kampala, and it'll go to highs of 29, and we'll see highs of 32 in a sunny Dar es Salaam at 27. It's 15 and cloudy in Johannesburg, highs of 22 and lows of 15, and mostly clear at 25 in Lagos, going to highs of 33. We'll see highs of 30 in a cloudy Kinshasa at 21.
Spice up your
There's
life.
still a lot of it in most parts of the city this morning, right bang in traffic hour. And we're looking at heavy coming off Jogo Road. It's touching on what's going on at Landis. Inbound traffic is really heavy going towards Haile Selassie. And there's traffic coming in from Gong Road. Still continues a little bit here and there on Mombasa Road as you're getting out towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. That'll look like that for some time. And what is this? It's Likoni Road. It's touching on the Southern Bypass. Southern Bypass, however, will take you into the city without too much of a hiccup. Raila Odinga heavy going out towards Gong Road. And Westlands is a beehive of activity this morning. The Thika Superhighway not letting up just yet. Quite some traffic now at that junction coming in from Kasarani, Mwiki Road. All right, still looks heavy. And there it is, the Degwa, just next to the Northern Bypass. There's some traffic there this morning. SpiceFM KE on Twitter. Let us know what's going on where you are and try and keep things moving this morning.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Conversation continues 24 minutes to 9 with our political commentators Gerald Bitok and Peter Mushendo looking at the politics of the country. Gerald, now is your turn. So a lot has been happening in the last couple of weeks and days. On the one hand, the leader of the opposition, Raila Odinga, is holding rallies at Jacaranda. Previously, it was at Kamukunji. Now, the new talk is from this supposed whistleblower who says something happened, and in fact, Raila is one who won the election. And Raila is now demanding that the Commonwealth comes in within the next 2 weeks. Right? So Commonwealth and the UN come in within the next 2 weeks and establish this. And Ruto should just vacate office, peacefully. Just go home, find somewhere to go, whether in Karen or whether you go back to Sugoi or whether you go to wherever. You just go, okay? And let the. On the other hand, Ruto is saying, look, this one, you will not get it. There is nothing for selfish people. There is nothing for people looking for something for themselves and their families. I am ready, willing, and available to work with any leader on the prosperity of this nation. Any other thing, we shall face each other. Yeah.
I think first of all, we'll start with the facts. And watu wa mtaa will tell you, hizo ni stories za jaba. That we're hearing about whistleblowing. In this vote, you didn't need any whistleblowing. It was very clear. And I remember during the elections, personally, I was running an independent tallying center. And this is what we are doing. Since the facing off of Mulolongo elections and the minor KI case, the credibility of a vote moved away from servers to a paper called Form 34B. The election terminates at the polling station. So you didn't need any magic. You don't need any whistleblowing. You just needed to add up your numbers. While we are adding up numbers, as the MIO were laying out carpets at KICC, without any numbers, without any figures whatsoever. And I said, I remember the last time I was there, I told you that Raila Odinga was going to lose this election. And he was not going to lose it because of witchcraft or because of anything else or because of someone else was more cunning, but because he didn't have the numbers. His numbers were not adding up. And before IBC even announced the results, I remember we had announced our results. and announce all the tallying that we are doing. Because when IEBC were posting the forms, we are adding up the numbers on an Excel sheet, and we built up a system that could do that. By the time IEBC was announcing, we had announced it over 24 hours earlier, almost 48 hours earlier, and we had announced the results. When they came in, they were tallying. Azimio never ran a tallying center. They said, the agent has been here, senior agent Kanchori has been here several times. I listened to him. He has said they never had any agents. They never had any process whatsoever to gather their votes. So when you talk about this all blowing on a vote that was very clear, you talk about a server. The people you saw in Jacaranda yesterday, the leaders that are there, governors, MPs, senators, and everyone else, they are products of the same election that we are talking about. The people in office, they are products of these elections. So we cannot scream using two sides of our mouths. On one, you accept that the elections were credible for governors, senators, and all these people, but somehow at the top you want to imagine that there was some magic. So when we come and talk about the facts, we talk about the numbers. If you're not telling us where you lost your vote at the polling station, then you better not have that conversation. And I remember also, now that you're saying Raila Odinga is calling on Commonwealth and UN, when the elections were running, he said he doesn't want any external interference on the electoral process. So suddenly he wants it. Now, those are the facts. Let's go to the politics. You have to, even Wajakoya is saying lost 2.8 million votes. That tells you how crazy these narratives are. Wajakoya 2.8 million votes. He said he lost it. To who? Who stole the first 2.8 million votes?
You people.
So went up. Well, which people?
Unless you're saying that they stole their own votes.
Yeah.
Someone else.
Unless no one stole his votes.
Yes.
But the thing is, unless you're manufacturing votes in your house, unless you're manufacturing votes in your house and you're saying, I can see them. Sioni mali zimeenda, then then we can have that conversation. Our good brother here is a good guy in Proverbs, and there's a proverb that says you cannot pickpocket.
I suspect you're referring to me.
You
okay?
I say you cannot pickpocket a naked man. You cannot speak about things that have been stolen from you that you didn't have from the first go. Now, when it comes to the political side of it, you have to give credit to Raila Odinga for always reinventing himself. He has told us to look back at the history, and we are going to look at it. We talk about the problems that he ran with Moi and how it ended up, another handshake. We talk about the problems he had with Kibaki and how it ended up in a grand coalition. We talk about the problems that he had with Uhuru Kenyatta, and he said that he was not going to accept the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta in 2017. Yes, he said he's not accepting it. But minutes later, after a deal, then he went in and he said, President, the President Uhuru Kenyatta was the leader of the country. So when you look at the history, what he's telling us is that now we can almost predict what he's looking for. Is he looking for another handshake? Maybe. Will William Ruto bulge? Because he's saying, unijui, uliza Moi. So we need to see, what did Moi do to him? What did he give him so that he became suddenly ensure that there was peace again? The credit on Raila Odinga is the political genius that he is. He is gunning up for 2027. The activities that you're seeing right now that Raila Odinga is getting involved in is not about the elections of 2017. And he knows it. He knows he lost the election fair and square. What Raila Odinga is trying to do is realize that his base is dying off. The truth is, just immediately after elections, I was in Kisumu actually, just after announcement, then we were having the cases that were coming up and all that. I was in Kisumu, and people were just saying, okay, fine, we voted for you, hiyo vitu ilienda, imepotea imeenda hivyo. He has realized that his base is dying off. What can he do to reinvent himself? We've seen Kalonzo Musyoka, the members of Azimio coalition, including the chairman, Uhuru Kenyatta. Where was Raila Odinga when the chairman of Azimio coalition was handing over power at Kasarani? Where was he? Where was Raila Odinga when Azimio chairman Uhuru Kenyatta was taking up a position of peace negotiator in Africa, given by the president who is sitting now, William Ruto? Where was Raila Odinga?
What do you think? Can I just interrupt you right there? What should, according to you, you're saying something should have happened at that juncture when the chairman of Azimio was handing power to now President William Ruto? What would you have suggested if this is the position that is being taken today? What would you have suggested should have happened at that time? Are you saying that it would have had more impact, or that people would have listened at that point when that was being done? Do you think it would have had a greater impact on the decision? What should have happened?
What I'm talking about is a dishonesty in it, because you're looking at an electoral process that included handing over, transitioning, right?
No, Gerald, stay with me for a minute. Because you're saying that where was he when this process was taking place? Insinuating that something should have happened to give this current action some kind of authenticity. What should that be? What should have happened at that time for Kenya to sit back and say, "Oh, hold on a minute,
even
this
that
guy's
time
actually serious at this time"? What
we're talking
would
about
that look like?
Before swearing in of President William Ruto, there was a process that happened. There was a court process, and they talked about the hot air. There's been enough time for him to present his case.
Okay.
Right now, he's coming up with rumors, not facts, because you cannot tell us after 100 days, more than 100 days, you come back and you tell us there's a report somewhere. There's a gentleman in a corner.
And why can't you tell us 100 days after? I mean, is there a time period? Is there a designated period when you can do these things? I mean, we're discussing politics and politicians. Do we segment them and quarantine them to certain time spaces within which they can do certain things? And where exactly does this happen?
The thing is, if you have a case, for instance, if Raila Odinga had a solid case on the credibility of that election, then he should have been able to come up with that almost immediately.
Does time guarantee the viability? And this is what I'm asking you to do, Gerald. Does time guarantee the viability of a case? And I'm asking you to explain to me how. This is the thing. What should have happened to make this thing look more authentic in September rather than January?
So this is what would have done. If the elections had happened that time and I come in the next day and I tell you the process that happened yesterday is not credible for this and these reasons. Give me the numbers. That would make more sense. We'd be more convinced. We'd have that conversation. But you cannot show up several months after the elections, not with facts. There's no audit process. They're not telling us they audited the election. They're telling us someone somewhere came up with a dossier and they're saying this and this because you are participators of this election. You saw the process. You have the numbers of that election. You are saying your votes were stolen. Then you should know where they were stolen. Take us back there. You've done an audit of the IBC process. You say that my vote, City Muga's vote in a village in Kogelo disappeared somewhere within Naivasha. Right? As an example, give us an audit process. But then you cannot come up with rumors and stories and tell us there's a guy in another country that came out of a dossier on an electoral process that you are part of. This is what I'm saying. If these guys had a case, they would have given us facts the next day. But now let's give them the benefit of doubt that they've taken time. Maybe you would have said that they've taken time to audit the process.
Sure.
Are they giving us any report on audit? Are they telling us our vote got lost along the way? If they're not giving us those facts, if they're not giving us an audit report, then these are stories that we should not entertain as a country.
General.
And when Raila Odinga says William Ruto should resign from office, how can you? Who employed it? Was it an interview? It was an electoral process. So if you want this guy to get out of office, wait for 2027. We get us through another voting process. But you cannot scream on top of vehicles that you're going to resign. Who is going to resign? Even if it was William Ruto, I was never going to resign. Raila Odinga can come and sit at the gate of State House. He can slip there. But the thing is, the process that endorsed the presidency is very clear. If you want to reverse that, then you need to get another electoral democratic process.
Let me go with your thought process, Gerald, and take us back to 2017 and then come to 2022. Is there anything Raila Odinga is saying that you haven't heard before in this regard, or even in a greater measure before? Is there anything you haven't heard?
There's nothing new.
In 2017, what did he say about that election?
It was not credible. It was fake.
And then what happened?
There was a handshake.
No. Yeah.
Handshake happened. And this has been my problem. Raila Odinga had 5 good years.
No. Before the handshake, what happened?
Of course, what he's doing now.
No. When was the election nullified?
In the Supreme Court?
Yes. Which year?
2017.
You see? There had been noise, nullification. All right? And the same postulation and analysis that we are now discussing was similar to then. Raila, eternal loser, never makes sense, never does this. It was there.
Yeah.
You see, there is what we think happens. That's why I began when Eric asked me earlier on. With these processes, when we comment, when I say we're half-cocked, there is a lot we really do not know. This is my view. Okay. So we can only discuss or talk about what we know and also give our opinion. But what we also don't know is the thinking behind what these people are doing. Because this same Raila Odinga, if you follow the things he has done from 1997, as our brother had mentioned, there are so many things he did which did not seem to make sense. There are many things he said which did not seem to make sense all along. But maybe to him it did. So right now, what you're saying, Gerald, yes, may not make sense to you. But is that what we ought to be looking at? Should we not be asking ourselves, why is it making sense to Raila Odinga to say what he's saying now at the time he's saying it? Why? What sense does it make to him?
What could be the sense? Because we have to go back to the subject. What is the subject? It's an electoral process that involves numbers. It's a process that's very clear. You wake up in the morning, you go and vote, you go back home, someone takes through your vote through that process, and it ends up somewhere being tallied and becomes numbers. Now, if we want us to discuss the electoral process, then we have to deal with facts. But if you want us to have a narrative of fiction and and all these crazy things, then you're taking us to another different territory. But if we're having a conversation about the election that he's saying was not credible, then it needs to engage us on the numbers. It needs to engage us on the process. It needs to follow the process.
There's that question that City is asking.
So
why do you think it's making sense to Raila now?
The only reason why it's making sense.
What game is afoot?
To be honest, I think if you're any person who can think would find it very traumatizing sometimes to listen to these stories that these politicians come up with. And the politicians don't want to be questioned on the basis of facts. You can bring in Raila Odinga here. I'll be very willing to sit across the table with him. I would want to understand what is it that he wants us to make sense of. Is it the numbers that he's missing? Where are the numbers? Where did they get lost? Where were they? Zilikuwa wapi ndio zikapotea? Tuambie zilikuwa wapi? Is it an issue of the process? At what point did we have a faulty process? But if he wants us to have a discussion, political conversation that he wants us to have now, that's a different story. It doesn't make sense to anyone else except himself. And this is what Raila Odinga, because he asked us to go back to history. And our good brother Siti Muga said also we go back to 2017. Let's look at what happened in 2017. An election happens. It comes up, says it was faulty. It goes in to Supreme Court. They make a ruling, they nullify it with very clear grounds on why they nullified it. It was an issue of the process. They said the process is as good as the results. Yep. And they gave recommendations that were adhered to in 2017 to the latter. It was about the transparency of the server. You remember the servers that we said on France. Now they say there's no stories of servers that are going to be concealed somewhere, sitting somewhere. We have to have a clear process. If it's about the forms, that the forms be on the public domain. But Raila Odinga never recovered from that hangover. There was a server somewhere which was hiding numbers. In his head, he's still thinking it's in 2017. This time, the forms were very clear in public domain. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry could download them and add up the numbers. Raila Odinga was still stuck there.
Gerald,
now he's bringing us to
you've gone into the realm of determining what is in Raila Odinga's mind. Try and push that argument now in this present day and age. What do you think is in his mind now? Because again, if I'm looking at history, who would have imagined that in 1997 his decision to disband his party and join KANU would have the outcome it did? With hindsight, we can all be clever and say this is what happened, but who could have foreseen it then? Who?
Do you think he foresaw it?
This is what I'm trying to determine.
Do you think Raila foresaw it? By the time Raila was going to State House and meeting with Moi and agreeing, yes, we can merge the two parties, do you think Raila was foreseeing him breaking up the party, or do you think he was foreseeing inheriting the party?
Actually, I saw him thinking, if I'm now entering Gerald's realm, I saw him thinking of inheriting it. Because the disagreement, if I recall correctly, was the choice of who the successor would be.
Yep.
That's where the big kerfuffle arose.
Yeah,
and it appeared that many members of KANU then agreed with Raila on that particular subject. This is all I'm seeing. Arguably, it could be said, if the process that they're not saying Raila, but the process of selecting the successor was other than Moi determining this is the person. Now, you see, when I say I don't understand it and we're never fully informed, this is what I mean. I'm looking at this situation, and right now with hindsight, I can claim to understand this. But even with hindsight, there's still many questions that I'm asking.
There's still a lot.
Yes.
What are the questions? For me, I don't see the questions. Actually, what happened in 1997? I mean, reading Raila is a open book. You don't need any science to understand Raila Odinga. What happened in 1997 is exactly what happened in 2022. So Moi calls him, he's caused problems on the street the same way he's doing now, the same way he has done every electoral cycle, and tells him, okay, chill, man, you come. Let's do this thing together. I'll hand this thing over to you. I'll pinpoint as hey, you can inherit me. What happens? Moi turns around and even disappoints every other person and picks up another gentleman from a corner, Uhuru Kenyatta. The same thing that happened, the only thing that has changed in 2022 is that actually Uhuru Kenyatta stood up and supported Raila Odinga, albeit not in a big way, but that was the same story. Wewe wacha kuzunguka kwa street, kuja ndaachana na William Ruto, I will endorse you. He endorsed him and he supported him. The same thing that happened now. Raila Odinga is doing two things at this point. He's reinventing his political mojo that has been lost since 2022. He has realized these guys are falling off and ile risasi yake moja imeisha, sasa bazuka ilienda tena 2022. He wants to create another gun for 2027, and to do that he needs to keep his base active.
So he's keeping the base active.
He needs to keep his base
Peter, do you
active.
think the same?
Yes, I think the same. And I think I will also challenge our media to, when we have such claims as having a dossier that questions the entire process of election that has been validated by our own Supreme Court, if somebody comes with a dossier, we need to dig deep and understand who are these people who are bringing this dossier. In this case, the dossier that the Honorable Raila Odinga is talking about, it is prepared by a company called Vanguard Africa, and it is read by somebody called Jeffrey Smith. These are the named whistleblowers in that particular dossier. Who are these people to Raila Odinga? And I will invite you to go to, in US, there is the federal regulations that you must do returns when you do business with foreigners. And in 2017, anybody would remember a very much publicized trip of the Honorable Prime Minister to the US, if you can recall. That particular trip was organized by Vanguard Africa. It was organized by Jeffrey Smith. The very two people named as the whistleblowers in this particular dossier. Now, if you go to the website of Vanguard Africa, you will find again the Africa spokesman named in that website is Gizongo. The man who was told to have, what did the Supreme Court say?
Hot hair.
He brought a lot of hot hair to Supreme Court. I mean, if I'm looking at those records, and I'm then comparing them to the so-called whistleblowers, I can only come to one conclusion, that practically this is something that was organized somewhere and it was amplified to become a dossier. And as you have clearly put, there is always an end game to what Raila Odinga does. There is always an end game to everything he does. And even this one, Raila Odinga is 70-something years. He's what you would refer into a spent political canon, but he still cannot let go. That's the truth. He still cannot let go. And I will tell you, one of the major things that faced those of us from Mount Kenya in the previous election that has just been completed last year, it is in terms of who takes over from the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta when he retires. Because I keep saying that for you to become a president in this country, you have to make coalitions because we do not have majority in this nation. And I'm sorry to break it to those people from Mount Kenya, that you are not majority in the Republic of Kenya. You are in significant minority. There is no particular race in Kenya that constitutes 50% of the republic. And therefore, for you to be able to win an election, you need to make
something more.
A coalition with so many people to become. Now, Raila Odinga needs to understand that if you get to the top, you can only go down. This guy, and I keep saying, today, the former CEO of Safaricom, Michael Joseph, took that company to the top and realized that the time for me to exit is now, because I've taken and I've given everything I can give to this company and I've taken it to the very top. One of the things I think the Honorable Raila Odinga ought to have done, it is exit when he was still at the top, because you cannot talk about the new constitution without giving credit to the Honorable Prime Minister. But that credit continues to be tainted after 2010. What he has done over and over again, it is to taint it. So Raila is just doing what he normally does. He wants to be part of this government. Because if we look at the interference that he has been associated with from 1982 when he is being associated with the coup, the result that come therein, it is him being part of government.
Does he want to be part of government or he wants to be government?
No, he wants to be part of government. He knows he cannot be government.
Does he? This is the thing. I think we're entering into the minds of people whom we do not know.
Yes.
Do you think he wants to be the president of the country, or he wants to share
right now with Ruto as president?
Hold on. They can still have a desire. He wants to be part of the government that is. Because listen to the words that he's speaking. which one do you see that he wants to be?
I'll tell you, I can take you back to the Raila that was addressing Kenyans back in 1997 at the Ufungamano initiative. The kind of rhetoric he was saying then, that Moi must go, he must vacate government, we will not pay tax. Those are the things he said in 1997. These are the things I'll take you back into January of the year 2005 when they are gearing up for referendum 2017. Look at every agitation by Raila Odinga leads to a compromise with government. So we can only judge him today based on history, not based on what we don't know. So I think for me, Raila Odinga is still dreaming that he wants to be part of government. Unfortunately for him, he is dealing with a very shrewd politician who is sitting at State House in the name of the Honorable William Ruto.
And that shrewd politician does not
and does not foresee anywhere they will work with Raila Odinga. And
he has already extended a handshake.
No, he has said wakunywe chai. Si watengeneze serikali.
We will hear from you. We want to open up the phone lines in the next hour. Good morning, 9 a.m.
Spice up your life.
Good morning, this is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseto. President William Ruto will today open a 4-day post-election seminar of the National Assembly in conjunction with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. The event, which is as per practice within the Commonwealth fraternity, normally takes place at the beginning of the term for newly elected legislators. The forum comes hot on the heels of a week-long House Committee's injunction, which was concluded yesterday. The forum will be key in enhancing the capacity of members of National Assembly to efficiently and effectively perform their constitutional mandate. It will further strengthen members' understanding of parliamentary practices, procedures and processes while developing a better understanding of the legislative system and democratic processes. The Ministry of Education has launched a guidance and counselling policy for schools. The move is aimed at facilitating students to focus on learning and help them protect themselves from distractions that affect their behaviour and school attendance and their social development. The Director General, State Department of Early Learning and Basic Education, Elias Abdi, said the policy will help teachers and other stakeholders to guide learners on risky behaviour that may hurt their studies and growth and development. Abdi cited drugs and substance abuse and radicalization as some of the factors affecting students' focus. He said the students need protection against the negative influences through a robust guidance and counselling framework at the school level. Now, former ICT Cabinet Secretary John Musheru has been appointed the president of Jumo, a London-based fintech company. Confirming the news in a LinkedIn profile update, Musheru said he will support the company to deliver its growth goals, navigate the regulatory landscape and build the firm's presence across the African continent under his new role. Jumo partners with banks, MNOs and other e-commerce players to deliver progressive financial choices to customers according to the company's Crunchbase profile. Now, police in Navaholo, Kakamega County, are probing an incident where a 67-year-old man is accused of killing a 54-year-old wife. Reports indicate that the suspect attacked his wife in what police said is a case of suspected love triangle. The deceased had paid a visit to a cobbler who is their neighbor, only for the husband to attack her. County Police Commander Joseph Kigen said the suspect will be arraigned once investigations are complete. The body of the deceased has been taken to Kakamega Referral Hospital mortuary. And Garissa Governor Nathif Jama has commended NGOs operating in the area for coming to the aid of drought-stricken residents, even as he called for doubling of efforts to mitigate against the same. Speaking when he hosted a team from a Light Horn of Africa, Jama said that it was encouraging to see more NGOs come on board and support residents in need. Alight is a humanitarian, non-profitable organization operating in the Horn of Africa in Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, where its large operations are. He said the immediate focus should be on life-saving interventions including water, food and retaining of children in schools, emphasizing on the need to have much more coordinated effort from all players that will ensure that all those who are affected are assisted. And President Salva Kiir has appealed to all South Sudanese people to maintain peace and order during the ecumenical visit. Speaking in Qatar, President Kiir urged all faithfuls to turn out in large numbers to receive the Holy Father, that is, Pope Francis. Pope Francis is expected to arrive in Juba on 3rd of February 2023, alongside two eminent religious leaders, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, retired Reverend Lane Greenshills. At the same time, President Kiir has declared Friday a public holiday for members of the public to attend the prayers at Dr. John Garang Mausoleum in Juba, according to the Minister of Presidential Affairs, Barnaba Marial Benjamin. And Oleza Krivtsova is under house arrest after she was charged of a social media post that authorities said discredit the Russian army and justify terrorism. Russian officials added Krivtsova to the list of terrorists and extremists on a par with ISIS, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban for posting an Instagram story about the explosion on the Crimean Bridge in October that also criticized Russia for invading Ukraine. And U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrived in Egypt at the start of a Middle East trip on which he will look to notch down Israeli-Palestinian tensions after an eruption of violence. Blinken, who will travel today and tomorrow to Jerusalem and Ramallah after his stop in Cairo, had long planned the visit to see Israel's new right-wing government, but the trip takes on a new urgency after some of the worst violence in years. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Alsato. Good morning.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Still continues this morning, and it's heavy coming off of Thika Superhighway. Langata Road is doing the thing right now. It's taking traffic and delivering onto Raila Odinga Way, and some of it then going out onto Uhuru Highway, getting to that Haile Selassie junction. The western part of the city is still jam-packed. Huge traffic coming off of James Gishuru and then going towards Waiyaki Way slowly. Coming off of the Thika Superhighway is traffic going towards the Pangani Underpass. Still heavy there. Kiambu Road is looking a little bit better, but not too much. Still a tad of traffic on Limuru Road, and coming in then from United Nations Avenue, Village Market, coming in from Whispers. Traffic still continues, even at 9 o'clock. Let's see what it looks like in about half hour or so. But for now, still heavy in some parts, and we are still in traffic hour. Be safe, folks. Let us know what's going on where you are on SpiceFM, KE, on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
9. Good morning. We'll open phone lines now, 0719-012-600. Our commentators, Peter Mushendu and Gerard Bictalk, are still with us in the studio. City.
Yes, please.
The proverb.
Indeed. This is from the country of Namibia.
Yes.
Envy and greed grow from the same stock.
Envy and greed grow from the same stock.
Yes. They're in the same WhatsApp group.
Same WhatsApp.
Nice of you to 2023 it up.
Very good. Gentlemen and lady, let's, as we talk about what we've been seeing, the rallies and all, let's also talk about the state of the nation in terms of this. The cost of living is rising. What you're saying, Peter, that people who are going to Jacaranda yesterday are people who are looking for hope because there's something that's not working. there's something that should have been working that's not working. There is an expectation of government that is not being realized and being delivered. The government itself is, making promises one after another on what it's going to do on the cost of living. We are distributing fertilizer, subsidized rates for fertilizer, so that farmers can grow the food, so that the food will come to the market cheaper. However, at the same time, we must realize that we must, tighten our belts and prepare ourselves. The CS for the National Treasury has said this year is going to be worse than last year. The drought situation is continuing. Food is getting more and more expensive. The government is requesting us, through our elected representatives in Parliament, to spend 400 billion shillings more in the next financial year than it has spent in the last financial year. Governors are asking to be given 400 billion shillings to go to all the counties in the next financial year. The government is saying, hiyo itakuwa ngumu, unajua pesa hakuna. Acha tukuongezea 10 billion peke yake. So we can only give you up to 370 billion shillings. 400 billion? No. But the national government is ready and willing to spend an extra 400 billion shillings.
Money that we don't have.
Money that we don't have. With all those things that are happening, do you get a sense that the political leaders, be they Kenya Kwanza, be they Azimio, are actually in tune with what's affecting Kenyans?
Well, I would say something that this government must look into very seriously. If we must make inroads with the common mwananchi, we must talk about our tax regime. Because tax alone cannot develop a nation by taxing our people. And I once said, because Gerard Bitok in another life, he's also a political show host, I have said in his show, and I will repeat here again, that for this country to develop, we must restructure how we seek funding from financial institutions all over the world. And when you have an institution like IMF coming back to the country, it is telling you that there is a problem with how we manage public agencies and public institutions. Because for IMF to actually give you a loan, they always give you those loans based on conditions that you must restructure this or restructure that. And I've always insisted, one of the countries in the world that has the greatest external debt is Japan. But they don't feel the pinch because every coin that they have borrowed, they have put it into good use. They have been able to revolutionize manufacturing of motor vehicles in Japan, and therefore they can continue taking external grants because they are able to manage what they get. And one of the biggest problem we have in this country, it is when we take loans out there meant to come and build road A to Z, and then we realize that Eli Klativ, who is a minister for mining, has a new project, and we will divert that money to go and do that project. And I think for me, if this country is going to be reconstructed and we are going to build the economy, we will not do it by exaggerating or putting a lot of taxes on Kenyans. Because one, you need to widen the tax net for you to be able to get enough tax, as you're saying. How do you widen the tax net? I keep insisting that before you tax Kenyans, and ask yourself why we do not have so many investors bringing money into this country, because that is one of the other ways that we are going to expand this economy, by making it easy for investors to come to this country. Today, look at our power, look at our power system, how we adjudicate on matters of power meant for production. We are using something called SIGO grids. It is the reason why if electricity, one substation goes down, the entire half of Nairobi goes for 17 hours without electricity. We must introduce something in electrical engineering, that's where my field is, called macrogrids, that you can be able to produce energy, solar energy, in Deya, where I come from, and part of Kikuyu constituency, and provide them with their own grid, that if something happens to Lokichogi or Lokicha power station, it is not going to affect production. So the government, before bringing these tax regimes, and these are the things that are pushing people to go to Jacaranda, because imagine, this guy already doesn't have food. on his table, and he has been asked that he has to pay more tax. That means he is going, anything that he is going to earn to be able to buy that ugari, he will first of all have to pay tax on it. Then it is not enough to feed the children. So the government must go back to the drawing board, ask ourselves, how do we widen the tax net? Because it is like governors, what they are doing in this country. They, like I have seen yesterday, people of the Ndegwa here in Kiambu, that the rad rate has been moved from 350 shillings to 36,000.
Imagine that, Ndu. In the Ndegwa.
From the Ndegwa. I hope nobody from the Ndegwa here. But those are the sad realities we are talking about. That government must, yes, we must pay tax. But that is the canon responsibility of any responsible Kenyan.
Yeah.
You must pay tax, because it also makes no sense that we have, I think, is it for about 14 million registered taxpayers? But more than half of that number always files zero returns.
So, Peter, I hear you saying clearly that there is a problem.
There's a problem.
There was a promise that was made to Kenyans, even if it was not. The responsibility of government, the responsibility of government is to create a conducive environment in which its people can live. So we've agreed here that there's a problem. We could have months and months of conversation about what a responsible government ought to do. I personally believe that there needs to be a direct route towards manufacturing. Until you start to build your own, you cannot protect your own. Until you have industry that works, you cannot protect your own. I don't think Kenyans would have a problem being taxed 50% if they could see that this is a result of their tax.
Yes.
That because of the tax that we see, we have flawless streets, that you turn on any tap in the country and water is running out of it, that you can send your children to school and they will not have a problem accessing an education with or without COVID, that you walk into any health facility today, you find medicine, you find a clinical officer, you find a nurse, you find a doctor, you get healthcare. Tax Kenyans 50%, I don't think they'd have a problem with that if they saw that there was then something coming out of it. But the truth of the matter is that today, the majority of Kenyans who walk into a shop, supermarket, whatever, are not able to buy bulk for their buck. There is and it is getting worse and worse. Before you know it, the 14th of February will come along. You don't know what you're going to face. You don't know if the shilling you have, actually you do know. You know that the shilling that you have is not enough for you to feed your family, for you to feed yourself, for you to do the very things that a government is supposed to ring fence for you. It cannot happen today. So now that hope that you speak of is what is in the mouth of many a Kenyan. It is not enough. It is getting worse by the day. People have to be creative to survive. It should not be. It doesn't matter if it's the proverbial 100 days, 100 years, whatever.
I think it is on the onus of government, and specifically the CS committee, that is Moses Kuria, in terms of investment and industrialization. I've given a story and I'll give it here. Dagote from Nigeria came to Kenya the other day and went and saw the president, and he wanted to invest in cement production in this republic. But after months and months of looking into the possibility of investing, he then came back and said that that investment in Kenya was not viable because, one, our power regime is meant to place the industrial man who wants to come and produce it. Our ease of doing business is not conducive for him to be able to do business. So Dagote moves to Ethiopia. And once and invests his money there and start doing Dagote cement. Today, Dagote cement is in our shelves in this country, and it is still cheaper than cement that is produced in this republic. That tells you there is something wrong. I've seen companies like Farmers Choice move from Limuru. I've seen companies like Bata Buret that is based in my place, Limuru, is moving to, I think, Botswana or somewhere, because they cannot be able to sustain the cost of production in this country. And I think that is something that this government, if we want to widen the tax net, we will only widen it by allowing investors to come to the country, not to increase the tax that we tax that common hustler that we talk about. So I think for me that this government has its work cut out for them. Because let me tell you, if anybody continues to advise the government to increase tax that is supposed to be paid by the common man, it is going to alienate this government. And that is something that must be addressed. We must look at today, if you land at Kigali International Airport in Rwanda, you can leave that airport with a business permit because they have made the ease of doing business in their country. Well, you will go, apply. If you require legal services, they are provided for in that airport. If you require a certificate of all the registration requirement, provided you have come with the right document, you will leave that airport and get to the city of Kigali with a registered business entity that has a bank account of your choice. Now, this country, we must do that. We have a lot of idle
We must get
lying
there.
around, and we must get there. I mean,
but that was the promise, Gerard.
but let me ask you: is it not funny that this country in the sub-Saharan Africa is sitting in one of the biggest water reservoir that is in Turkana? But surprisingly, one of the counties that we are giving a lot of relief food is Turkana. This country is sitting in a lot of reserve for a lot of mining that government has not exploited. They need to invite, because these are investors that come to do these things. And if you cannot create ease of doing business for investment, then taxing Kenyans some more will only alienate this government. And I must say this, having been one of the people that were in favor of this government, that we must sit down, look at our tax regime. Are we pressing a Kenyan who is already pressed some more? Because let me tell you, the uprisings that you have seen in the world, they are not brought by government honest officials of government stealing money. They are brought by taxing people without seeing results. She has said that very well. Go to Switzerland. They pay more than 50% of their earning. More than 50% of their earning is paid as tax to government. In fact, their prime ministership is it is rotating. The presidency is rotating. Why? Because these guys, when they pay their money, they get health services, they get education, they get good roads, they get ease of doing business. They have no problem of paying their tax because they can see results. But now, ask a Kenyans to pay some more on that unga or on that fuel, and he is still struggling to take his kids to school. The only result you will get is an angry Kenyan.
It's people who get dissatisfied. Gerard, so come in now, because the hustler was being promised that the bigger thing that is going to happen to a hustler is we're going to make it easier for you to do business. We're going to make it easier for you to earn a living. We're going to facilitate you so that you can earn a living. And then, of course, immediately the president said is when you come in there, you will be able to then contribute more to the well-being of the country. But the conversation has moved more and more from we are facilitating to you will pay taxes. Such that the latest now is the president is being nicknamed Nabii Lazaro Mtoza Ushuru. Zakayo Mtoza Ushuru.
I think that's
what's a mismatch here? Why would the president deviate so much from the original messaging?
I think, first of all, I think we are being very hard on William Ruto's administration. It's barely 150 days.
Barely.
Yes. I'm sure even most of us here have not even dewormed this year since the elections ended. There's only much we've been able to do within that. There is a
tunadeworm na nini bwana, hata hatuwezi afford.
So I think we are being a bit hard on them. When it comes to the issues of cost of living, majorly it revolves in Kenya. It revolves around food. When you talk about cost of living, talk about unga, talk about sugar, talk about it's the consistent. I mean the consistent the food, the basic food that we talk about. So when you look at food, we talk about subsidizing production. That's what William Ruto said. He said he's not going to subsidize consumption, and that is probably why we're still having the prices high. As they are there, the cost of living is still high. And he said, I'm not going to subsidize consumption, I'll subsidize production. So as we are speaking, there's an activity that's going on subsidized fertilizer that they're distributing across the country. I think those are some of the things that media are not looking at because those are positive activities. So we expect that we're going to have better harvest this year, and maybe we can have some level of stability in terms of food prices. And also in a few days, they're talking about bringing in duty-free grains, maize and rice.
Talking about
It's already the process already.
In this country, when things are like that are talked about, it's already happened.
No, it's not happening. The Minister of Agriculture, and you can go and counter check, the Minister of Agriculture for the last almost 30 days has been working on a framework to get companies to import grains duty free. Maize at around 920,000 metric tons and rice.
Gerald, I have to hold you right there. Are you telling me that the maize that was produced in the North Rift and maize producing areas in this country have all been taken up so that we need more importation?
It's not.
Are we saying that the rice we have in Mwea has all been taken up, so we now need to import more rice? Is that what we're saying?
I'll challenge you to that, City Morgan. If you can have your stats right, then I'll be very ready to consume those numbers. As it is right now, the grain reserves are very low. Talk to millers. Call up any miller and ask them how easy it is to get maize. To go
talking about the maize farmer, not the miller.
Yes, the maize farmers have already for the last months, because most in North Rift we harvest from October. We have the maize from October.
But it's so also good to help you so that he can note that.
Disposed.
Yes.
And this is why I come from North Rift, and I'll tell you this: if there's any farmer that is holding up maize, then they're doing it probably for price prospects. But the market as it is, the grain reserves are very low. Ask anybody who is milling maize. So they're talking about bringing in more grains so that it's able to stabilize the market. If the millers can mill cheaply because the raw materials are cheap, then you can ensure that we have cheaper unga. As it is right now, millers are getting maize at almost 4,200 per bag. It is expected maybe to come down to almost 4,000 as if we have more grains coming into the country. So hopefully that will stabilize, but not also to throw off the concern of the cost of living and the taxes that you're speaking about. And that is a rider for William Ruto. The same hustlers that made him president are the same hustlers that could actually dethrone him. Very easy. That's fact number one. Fact number two, most of Kenyans are not paying taxes. That's the reality. Filing zero, hata kama uko na pesa, it's part of the game. Unaweka tu weka zero, file zero. Most Kenyans, over 70%, are filing zero. To run this country is either you do two things: either you're getting loans or you're taxing people. So when you get the government we've been running on loans for the longest time, and you are saying now we need to run away from loans and see if we can ensure that we can build local capacity. So we have to make a choice. Last year, when you're having discussions in the media, you're talking about the high cost of loans and the loan burden that the country is having. Now, we are saying let's take a small break from that. Let's try and create our own local capacity in terms of tax collection. How do you ensure that almost every Kenyan who is earning is able to pay taxes? If you're not earning, of course, you cannot pay. But if you're earning, you're able to pay taxes. You're talking about companies that are running away from taxes. They are evading tax. So we need, first of all, to get that discussion and be very honest. In other countries, tax is a very serious matter. Go to the US and refuse to pay taxes. You'll see. They'll come for you in the house and they'll kick you out. But in Kenya, you can file zero return and sleep very well. And you have money in the house. We've been earning money. So we need to get to a point where we have personal responsibility in terms of ensuring that you can build it's an issue of patriotism as well. Pay your taxes. So let's ensure that everybody comes into the tax net, pays their taxes. As long as you're earning money, lipa ushuru. If you're not earning money, then it is fine. But we must ensure that we pay taxes. But also, as you're talking about paying taxes also, we need to ensure that we can have more Kenyans earning. The reality right now is that the biggest percentage of Kenyans are not working. Over 60% of Kenyans are unemployed. Barely 40% people who are engaged in active employment. So we need also to start having a conversation, as Ndua said. Let's talk about direct production. That I can wake up this morning and I can say I want to manufacture something, and the government facilitates me and gives me a favorable environment to be able to thrive on that sector. As we're speaking now, Kenya, as it is the worst place to set up any manufacturing industry or to do it. It's the worst. It's the last place you think about. I've not gone everywhere in there on earth, but I can, from the places I've seen, I can tell you it's the worst. And we have to be competitive. Look at the region as it is. Travel to Tanzania, go to Tanzania. Many international companies are setting up. Look at Ethiopia with these punitive rules in terms of capital. You take money there, to get money out of that place is rhythm, it's reggae. It's another issue. But people are going there because the investing environment is so favorable. Samsung moved out of this country, set up in Ethiopia. They are wrecking money. Look at shoes that are being manufactured in Ethiopia. A lot of shoes and textile. So we need to start having a conversation around also ensuring that even as we are spinning Kenyans and saying we want to get money from you, we must ensure that these people also have money in their pockets. And this was the clarion call in this campaign, putting money in your pockets. So now you want to ensure that in this time, they are saying they are planning. Let them plan, but not very soon. As you're seeing, Raila Odinga is already in, and anachukua tena wale maasla William alikuwa ameenda now. If he's not very careful, then we'll have a problem. So let's have a conversation around production and ensuring that every single Kenyan has money in their pockets.
So why the question is, these are all politicians. This same politician who was able to capture the imagination of the people and tell them it's all about the hustler and making the hustler, facilitating the hustler. Why would, in 140 days, that same politician sort of drop that messaging?
But you see, the truth
because
also,
the conversation now is not about how I'm going to facilitate you. Okay, there's a hustler fund and all, but it's 500 bob to 1,000 and 300. It's not about how I'm going to facilitate you. It's not about how I'm going to facilitate you to run your hustle. It's about you will pay tax, and wait for a year before the price of unga comes down.
And we will remove subsidy, and we have removed subsidy.
I think also
why is such a drastic change in messaging?
I think in all honesty, we must also accept that there's only much magic you can do when it comes to running a nation. In the words of Rigiji, we inherited a dilapidated economy. That's the words of Rigiji. It's the reality that for the past almost 8 years that post-Kibaki, we've been talking about debt and the debt burden in this country. It has been always about getting money out of this country. Now, what if we say, well...
Gerald, you really want to walk into that?
Let me escort you walking into that, Gerald. Because if you're able to look at it right now, and you can, in hindsight, in 2023, say, actually, it's been happening for 8 years. Guess what? You felt the effect of it. And the president today was in government during these 8 years that we are speaking of. So they knew. And that is directly linked to the question Eric is asking. Why would you make a promise knowing full well the state of things? You told people that you were going to do a certain thing, knowing the factors that were present in the country to date. You just used the word magic. So what magic did you really think you were going to do?
He laughed at... There was a political lie that was passed by the handshake government in the name of 100 bob unga subsidy. It was a lie.
It never happened.
William Ruto himself laughed it off and said, "Mimi nikiweka Biblia chini hivi."
Those were the words he used. Unga itashuka. So what magic was going to happen? Taking all these elements into consideration. So you cannot then come and say, actually, you know what? They inherited a dilapidated economy. Did they not know that the economy was dilapidated before they came into government?
You don't need magic to run a government. That's not what you need. You need pragmatism. I mean, and this story of a dilapidated government, taxes are paid by the second, by the minute, on a daily basis. And then what does the government do? It expends it.
It's it.
Yes, it's you bring it, it is used. You bring it, it is used. Now, from the time this government came in, are we saying they have not been collecting taxes? They have.
Yeah.
You'd rather even have said, guys, going into this thing, you know what have endeared you more to people? Going in and saying, actually, you know what, guys, we're going into something and things are thick. I would have liked to see that. But the truth of the matter is that you don't get the vote made on tales of woe.
Yes.
You get the vote made on promises, whether you know or you do not know that you cannot keep them, and that is the truth. So let's not try and window dress things and say, well, actually, it's because of what we got. No,
I think sometimes also we become very unrealistic. What would you rather have done, though? If you are the president today, what would you have done?
The truth.
To make unga.
The truth, Gerald. And that is one thing that has escaped governments. The truth. Tell your people the truth. Don't come and stand tomorrow and say, actually, you know what? The reason why we can't do what is because of who did what before. No, this is the truth, folks. This is what is happening. This is what we can or cannot do. Hang on and let's see how we can work through this thing.
And demonstrate
the truth.
Yes. Demonstrated by, in fact, saying in the next financial year, I'm even going to spend less.
Come on.
Don't come and say in the next financial year, I want to spend 400 billion shillings more. Come on. And then you're telling us it's going to be a tough year. How is it going to be a tough year if you're spending more?
You're spending the money. Then you people all carry yourselves to Mombasa and you spend, I don't know how much, in the same week. By the way, it was not 3 days difference. In the same week, when you told people, guys, okay, guys, belt, tighten. I don't even know how many holes are left in this belt. We're going to tighten things a little bit. Then you go to Mombasa, people decide that KSG can go suck a lemon. We are not attending this training of yours, this induction of yours. Meanwhile, we're going to sign the register and we are going to go on holiday. Then we come back tomorrow. Stop it.
Don't forget the allowance that you get for signing that particular
The reason
thing,
why they signed the register is so they could get allowance. IBEC sits. Deputy President comes and says, actually, you know what? We've not been able to agree. They want more money we don't have. You don't even have a hold on things. Tell the truth, and that's
Take
what I'm
Minute
saying.
Maid. People take Minute Maid. It's a time for that Minute Maid break. When you want to do what we want to do now, which is excel, it's time to take a Minute Maid break.
Clearly.
Oh, yes.
I think it's time.
Yeah, chagua yako. Nataka apple, tropical, orange, mango, pulpy orange. Which
Apple
one?
any day.
Apple any day. Eh?
Yes.
Yeah. Same for you, Gerald.
Ama ongeza kakitu ndani. It is too much.
We'll be back shortly. We'll open the phone lines to hear from you. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Sleepwalking through the afternoon. Sleepwalking through the afternoon. Sleepwalking through the afternoon.
Don't live life on repeat. Enjoy your break moments with Minute Maid Delight, a treat that awakens your senses and fills you with vitality. So fill those break moments with the indulgent sensations of Minute Maid, featuring delicious mango, tropical and apple flavors. Minute Maid, filled with life.
London Mulu, DJ Absolute. When the gang is together,
got the sugar, got the spice.
Yorada. Yes.
I have missed you like hot hamburgers. Yeah?
Like hot hamburgers.
You know, bad boys give more money than you can count.
Hey, bad boys give more money than you can count. If it's fun, it's funky, it's fresh, you're definitely going to catch it here. I don't know what you do every day from 11 a.m. to 3 o'clock, but if I were you, I'd tune in to
Sugar and Spice only on 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So if you say it's on, then it's on.
Yeah. Sunny conditions in Nairobi, highs of 27 and lows of 15. It's 19 and sunny in Nakuru, highs of 29, and we'll see highs of 27 in a sunny Nyeri at 16. It's also 16 and sunny in Eldoret, highs of 27 and lows of 11. We're looking at partly sunny conditions in Mombasa at 29, and it's 27 and sunny in Malindi, going to highs of 30. It's sunny at 25 in Kisumu, highs of 29, and it'll go to highs of 30 in Kakamega, where the sun is up at 27. Looking into Kampala, it's sunny at 23, highs of 29, and we're looking at cloudy conditions at 28 in Dar es Salaam, going to highs of 32. Looking south into Johannesburg, it's cloudy at 16, highs of 22 and lows of 15, and partly sunny conditions at 25 in Lagos, going to highs of 33. It's cloudy in Kinshasa this morning, highs of 30 and lows of 22, and looking east into Beijing, it's sunny Monday afternoon at 8 degrees. That'll be the high, going to lows of -7. Paris is cloudy this morning at 5, highs of 9 and lows of 1, and it's cloudy in London at 7. We'll see highs of 10 and lows of 4. New York, Sunday night, still reading cloudy at 7. Coming into Monday, highs of 11 and lows of 1.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life.
All right, the TikTok of the clock says we'll be out of traffic hour in a short time. We're also looking at it on the roads today. Langata looking a lot better just at the mouth of Raila Way going towards Gong Road. That nexus that meets Gong Road coming in from Kenyatta Avenue as well as going into Hurlingham. Still a bit busy. We'll see some traffic along Uhuru Highway through to the junction of Haile Selassie. It's still heavy on the Thika Superhighway. Today was the day when we got the baptism of fire. Or is it baptism of traffic? It's quite something still happening on the Thika Superhighway, and we're looking at Western, still pretty busy. James Gishuru, busy crossing over towards Wayaki Way, but then you're going to get towards Kuna Road, Red Hill Link Road, that's all right. Village Market, free and clear now. Still looking at a little bit of traffic on Limuru Road for some time. Talk to us through the morning. Keeping safe and moving. SpiceFM KE on Twitter.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
We continue
94.4 Spice
to 10 for the next 22 minutes. We'll open the phone lines for a little bit. So Gerard Bitok and Peter Mushandu, political commentators, are here with us in the studio. We're talking about the state of the nation politically. Yes, the conversation now has shifted into whether the election was legitimately won or not. We're back into that conversation. When Raila Odinga is speaking in Jacaranda, wherever the president is, everybody who's speaking before the president is responding to Raila. I think, gentlemen and lady, that these two gentlemen are working together. The handshake is actually at play. What we are seeing here is the handshake at play. Remember before, the first time Raila said he went to Kamukunji, he was supposed to have gone to Jacaranda. Then something happened and they were all very busy and they were not available. And then soon after, we had the conversation, the memo coming from the president to the speakers of the two houses of parliament, create this position, this and the other. Now there's a whole conversation about rejigging the IEBC and everybody knows it. But you see, our attention has moved from all those things we are discussing today. Cost of living. Nation is trying to put it as a headline. It will not be picked up anywhere. Last week, it was a similar headline again on the cost of living. Nobody is biting these headlines.
They are biting Jacaranda.
It's the Jacaranda that's biting. And what is happening is that the government is actually... We are coming into February. City, do you know when the new revamped Hustler Fund for SMEs is going to be launched? Do you know the date?
I have absolutely no idea.
Do you know the date, Ndu? Do you know the date, Peter? Gerard, you're an insider. Do you know the date?
Who said that?
If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it waddles like a duck,
You know.
There was a previous pressure.
Have you seen any Gazette notice with my name on it?
None yet.
Have you?
Unajua,
CIA
maybe
operative
He could be
come here.
He could
Come
also
here, go there.
Butov could also have the same job description as Dennis Itumbi.
He said, come here, go there.
Come here, go there.
CIA operatives don't walk around with CIA and blazon on their
Listen,
forehead.
just to finish my thought.
Yes.
The whole conversation about the revamped Hustler Fund is nowhere. In terms of pressure from the people, nothing. In terms of cost of living, this was rising. Before this, whenever the president went, he had to address what the government is doing today. Ministers had the pressure to say we are importing maize, we are not importing maize. Are we buying maize from farmers? We are not buying maize from farmers. This is what conversations that were there. Now, it has moved. It is responding to Raila. When you look at the people who were speaking in Narok yesterday, all of them was standing up and saying, it's Raila, it's Raila, it's Raila, it's Raila. We are being diverted, all of us. These two gentlemen, William Ruto and Raila Odinga, already had a handshake.
For me, first of all, I'll be very disappointed. So disappointed if William Ruto gave Raila Odinga another handshake again. I'll be disappointed because then he'll also have fooled us. He's told us several times that he's not going to give this guy a handshake. He had an issue with the handshake that Raila Odinga had with Uhuru Kenyatta. So if he makes that turn, then he just becomes another political conman. I'll be very disappointed myself personally. And I'll quit politics, I'll go open a church somewhere in a corner, and I become a pastor. I become a pastor. I'll be
And you think there's less politics in the church?
And you'll invite him to come to
Unless
the
I want
church.
to start politics of
At least in church you can divide and rule.
Unless I'll be eating something. You need to find a way to eat government money. Whichever way it is, you have to open a church, at least you pick it up from there. So I'll be very disappointed. Secondly, what you're saying about the possibility of an handshake and these guys working together. Politicians are animals from the same fold. And you never know what they're saying. If I told you that the issues of the handshake, the Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga's handshake came in way earlier, even before the elections were repeated, that thing had been discussed kitambo. By the time Raila Odinga was saying he's not going to participate in those elections, that thing had gone. It was gone at that point. That time we are fighting, we were saying, no, hakuna machozi Monday, pigeni tear gas. Those guys already had those discussions running. Ask yourself, why in God's earth, when Raila Odinga was swearing himself in at Uhuru Park, there was no police. Police came in the morning, they disappeared. Then Raila Odinga had fun, swore himself in. They had a good party. Wakaenda bash, wakaenda nyumbani. When a sitting government was there, Uhuru Kenyatta was saying he was not going to entertain anarchy. So if you think or if you feel there could be such undertones in terms of handshake and getting this guy in, I would not be very surprised, honestly. Politicians, what they talk at night, whatever it is. I sit in spaces. Sometimes you go to those places where politicians sit. Leo mmetulima sana bana. Lakini ngojeni. Next week, mtatuona. So I will not be surprised. But then again, what is the opportunity cost? Who pays the price for this politics? Bad politics. The people.
Yep.
You think about this. We are no longer discussing government policies and holding the government accountable to its promises. We are talking about, we are in another campaign season, political season. You're throwing in words on the arguing and all these things. And this is where I actually disagree with the government. What business do you have responding to Raila Odinga?
Do your work.
You know,
you've been given government for heaven's sake.
Let's focus.
One of the things that I have always insisted, and I'll say, every time you hear the word government of national unity or handshake, it has never and it will never be in the interest of Wanjiku. It will always be in the interest of the politicians that are there involved in. And I think for me, it is very unfortunate, as you have put it, that now all the other tones that are being discussed, too unfortunate, all of us here are discussing the same thing. Raila Odinga and William Ruto. I mean, we settled this thing at August 2022, and somebody met the threshold provided for in the Constitution. You have all the business to deliver to people. If you stand as a politician that is inclined to William Ruto's position, I think the best you will do is to sell the narrative of hope and what the government is doing, not to tell us what you will do with Raila Odinga. I mean, 3 successful presidents have been dealing with Raila Odinga, from the President Moi to President Kibaki to Uhuru, who has gone. I mean, this is a very old narrative. I'll say this as someone who unequivocally supported this government of Kenya Kwanza government. It is time we stopped the nonsense of parading the issues of Raila Odinga as if they are the ones that are affecting Kenyans. Raila Odinga does not stop government from going to look for investors to come and invest in this republic. Neither does he stop government from reviewing our tax regime to see whether we can be able to salvage Kenyans from being squeezed everything they have until they have nothing. Raila Odinga does not stop this government from rearranging the budget that is realistic and that is because these 400 billion shillings we intend to increase in the budget, it is not the money that we have. And I'll tell you, if you look at the consolidated fund, where all our taxes go in, every bit of tax we pay goes to the consolidated fund. The consolidated fund is also where we derive all the payment that we pay to our debts, both in principal and in interest. That's what we derive in. Look at the responsibility of the consolidated fund in terms of meeting our external debt is concerned, vis-a-vis the kind of amount that we are talking that is coming to consolidated fund. That will tell you, as much as we widen the tax net, much of that money will still go to pay external debts that have not been beneficial to this republic. And that is the truth. That you have a country that is exaggerating. You know, I was surprised Bitok to pass through. You move from Ruaka all the way to Gitaro, the new Western bypass. And you are told that that bypass costed the Kenya taxpayers money 23 billion.
It was $1 billion a kilometer.
And so many, over $1 billion a kilometer. It is 19 kilometers for your information. And a lot of feeder roads have been stolen. They were not put. If you move from Dendero all the way to Gitaro, you will find a lot of feeder road missing. Some people who have prime roads have been rad-rocked. They cannot use their roads for commercial purposes because there are no entry and all those accesses and what have you. Now, when a whole government spends every particular opportunity to address Raila, you go to open a housing scheme rather than addressing the benefits therein of having that scheme, you are talking about Raila Odinga. You go to open a data, you are celebrating data privacy day, rather than talking about how we will continue protecting the data of Kenyans in the era of these new technologies. Raila Odinga. You go to a prayer day, rather than talking about how God has been able to get us to this. Raila Odinga. We must stop this. And I'm saying it has to stop, and we must now start addressing the real issues. The real elephant in the house is, why are we overtaxing Kenyan who does not have a job?
And I think, you know what, in sometimes when you're trying to find the conversation that you ought to have, you need to then make sure that every essentially missile that is brought your way to divert attention has to then be sent in the right direction. what should we be doing today? What conversations ought we to be shaping? Because it's tomfoolery, all of this. When you're talking about this, that really doesn't matter. Today, I mean, because sometimes point the direction in what is happening today. There's still drought in 23 counties in Kenya.
Yep.
Today. Yeah. Today, children are going to school for which facilities are not adequate for them to go. Today, literally today, the 30th of January, grade 7s are going to school in primary schools where facilities are not adequate.
Not adequate. They are non-existent. They are not labs.
They don't exist. School. Today, people in Kenya are saying, you know what? Okay, thank you very much. We don't even need a doctor in medical facilities. You know what we want? Somebody who can look at me and tell me, this is the ailment that you are suffering from, and then let me look at that shelf, and there will be medicine on that shelf that I can buy. They don't even want a doctor. They just want somebody who looks like they have some kind of medical knowledge and that there's medicine on the shelf that they can actually purchase. That is the Kenya we're talking about today. But here we're talking about, and there's a government in place that's supposed to do these things. And you're talking about the previous government who did or did not do what? Why are you focusing on that instead of focusing on the thing that needs to be done today? And that's what I'm saying. Take that missile of misinformation and diversionary tactics and point it in the direction of which things ought to be happening today. Why are we talking about taxes? From 1960, we've been talking about taxes. We're now in 2023, we're talking about taxes. When Kenya could have been manufacturing. When Kenya could have been manufacturing today. Where industry and protectionism could have been conversations that could be had in Kenya today. We're talking about this nonsense politics as opposed to building the nation. And then we're fueling the conversation. No, man.
In fact, I'll tell you one of the things. I'll tell you one of the things.
Wacha nikupatia yangu. Kunywa some Minute Maid yangu.
Even I take a Minute Maid. The whole dough is very tired.
Yeah, but I think something must give.
Something
because
has to give,
I have a friend of mine who is a very serious plastic producer here in the industrial area. And I induced him to come to my place in Deya Limuru and purchase land because it is relatively cheaper so that he can expand. So he comes, purchases like 40 acres of land so that he can come and expand his plastic companies, 5 of them. And then for you to be able to power 5 companies, you need power to a tune of 66 kV. So you go, you apply, you do a quotation in Kenya Power, and they tell you, for us to bring power 11 kilometers from where that 66 kV is, you got to pay 58 million shillings.
What?
Yes. 66 kV.
How do they work this 58 million shillings?
There is a lot of libet charges that. Let me tell you some of the things that I feel that if government does not address, we will not get where we want to be. And I keep saying about power regime because it is one of the reasons that manufacturers are hearing these nations and they are running. 58 million, you are paying to bring 66 kV line 11 kilometers away from where the Nini. Then when you bring, you are expected as a company to build your own substation because stepping down 66 kV to be able to produce in a company, you have to have your own substation to step down power. That substation as an individual is going to cost you 40 million shillings to do.
You're at 100 million here.
No. Tell me this with all honesty and fairness.
And this is only power.
Yes, with all honesty and fairness.
And the government
let me tell you. You tell me whether a manufacturer will do manufacturing in the country. You come, you buy land, probably 7-8 million per acre. You're doing 40 acres because you want to have where you separate the plastics and all those things and whatever. You spend buying that land, you're spending like 150 million. The government asks you to pay 4% stamp duty. You go, you start a process called the process to actually change of user from agricultural to manufacturing to commercial. It is costing you money. You want to build a company that is big, you have to go through a process in a land that they call amalgamation, where you have to join the titles before you actually elect the structures, because you have to join and make one title.
That has a cost.
Costs you money. You have to go to the county and apply for architectural approval. Takes time, has money, you are paying millions. Once you are done with structural approval, you have an architectural, you have now go to the county engineer and apply for structural approval. You have National Environmental Management you have to do public participation with people. It costs you money for NEMA certification. You have to have retain a structural engineer, an architectural engineer,
and all these things you have not started.
These things
you have
not started. We are not talking. You have not started. You then eventually have to get what is called a construction permit from the county government to be able to put up that company. And when you do, the company, the Kenya Revenue Authority, will have to come and audit everything that you have spent, and you have to again pay revenue on the same money. You have not even put up a structure. Not single structure or a single stone in that company. And you have paid government almost 500 billion shillings. Now, you ask yourself, Eric, how are we going to caution a manufacturer to be able to come? This is what I think. It is your responsibility, Eric, if you have the company to build your own substation. But it is the responsibility of government to waiver rebate charges on you. Bring the power to your door. They start charging you for spending it. Today, they are charging you, when you look at that quotation, they are charging you for that transformer that you are importing. They will tell you that transformer for 66 kV is 24 million. If I go to India or I go to China or I go to Belgium and I import my own transformer, it will cost me 10 million. But when I come to Kenya, they will charge me the income tax on the same amount for that. They discourage me from importing some of my own. So this is what I think. That the conversation, and I say as a Bitok, I would be very disappointed if there was a conversation between the president and the leader of opposition.
The writing, Peter Mushendo, Mene, Tekel. What's the other one? Habal said. That's it. It's on the wall, my friend.
So that is the conversation that we need to have. We need to be speaking to the CS of industrialization and investment on how are we going to caution manufacturers to be able to manufacture in this country. Because I have sat with that guy and he's telling me, Mushendo.
And already he has invested in buying the land.
In fact, he is of the opinion, Mushendo, because now this land we bought has appreciated a little bit. Let's sell it and let's move. This is the truth. And you see, we are talking someone who is going to import about 4,000 jobs to village people there who do not have jobs. They will now start earning something out of it. We are talking about, he is a Muhindi. He believes in their faith, they believe that they don't just need to feed the people. They also need to feed animals. So he has also purchased another piece of 10 acres piece of land where he has drilled water and put up here to give to...
so now...
and this is the person...
They could get tax incentives from government. This is it. To allow those things to happen.
That is the conversation this country must have. We must not talk about Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga... I'm sorry. Raila Odinga, I was talking about him when I was in class 8 in 1997.
And now here you are.
And I'm here, finished. You
are advising investors.
I'm still speaking about... I mean, we need to be ashamed as a country that we are talking about a political contest that was settled last year. We must start speaking about matters that concern Kenyans. Today, I am walking...
Give this message to our friend Gerard, because he does not work for government, but he meets with these people. He hobnobs.
They hang around.
They hang out together. So, Gerard, in about a minute as we conclude the conversation, Gerard, what message is that the people in government needs to hear? As you're hearing from even people all over.
I think for me the message will be, and I've been very consistent with this, that we need to start working. The campaigns are over. We had an election that was settled, and it's a business of the bereaved to cry. Yeah, you cannot be crying with the bereaved. The opposition has a right to cry and talk about all those things. Let them cry. Wacha ilie hiyo kitu watoke. Watu wanasema mtu akipata msiba naambia wacha alie hiyo kitu mtoke. Wacha opposition ilie hiyo kitu watoke. They accept that election was over, but we cannot also as a government, or the government cannot, I cannot say we. The government cannot enjoy itself in that morning and crying. We have better issues to deal with. And I think also when it comes to conversations, I think every sector of this country has failed in terms of shaping the conversations. I'm applying the media as one of a media house. I'll say even the media has failed. When you look at the newspapers, it's always the political news and the things that sell. I think as a country, we've not gotten to a point, even some of us who are shaping conversations, to get to a point where we say, let's start talking about the issues. Let's hold the government accountable. Let's also hold the opposition accountable. We are all living in this country. The opposition and the government are members of this country, and the wananchi wote ni wa hii dunia, Kenya moja. So we need to get to a point where we're holding everybody responsible. If it's Raila Odinga, we should be asking him why, when the state of the economy is as it is, when people are jobless and they cannot consume, you have time to go and take thousands of people in one place and sell them narratives, political narratives. And for government, at the point that we've given you power, you asked for votes, we gave you. You had a plan. We need to see that plan rolling out. The ministries, why do you have a minister going out to speak political messages when you should be telling us about what you're doing as a ministry? We need to get the Ministry of Industrialization. What are you doing? Ministry of Energy. Why are we having energy rights? Explain to us. Why are you having X and all that? What are you doing about it? Ministry of Agriculture, what are you doing to ensure that the farmer can produce cheaply and we can have food next year? You want those stories. You don't want stories, political things, rooftop. We don't want to see people on rooftop of vehicles. Your kazi ilisha. We want to see you in offices. We want to see what you're telling us about the plans that you have. I'm very consistent in that. And as a Kenyan who also pays taxes, and I also need to ensure that the government is giving me value, not only for my vote, but also for being a citizen in this country. And we all in our country. So that's the message. President William Ruto, wherever you are, that is the candid message, and I think that's what every other Kenyan is saying. And we need to move on. Hangover elections in August.
Gerard Bitol, Peter Mushendo, thank you very, very much, guys, for joining us. Have a lovely Monday. It's 10 a.m. See you tomorrow.
Spice up